All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome, Benjamin Veris Studebaker.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Thank you. This is our third, I think, or I don't know. I think this is the second U.S. Game of Thrones 2024 election cycle since I used my wiles, not my feminine wiles, but my white worm wiles, to be like, hey, Benjamin, this is fun. We should do something like twice a month until the election's settled. And that means, just so you know, not until November 4th, but until both sides accept the results of the election. And then I will hope you'll be having so much fun. You'll be like, we should just continue at least once, something once a month. But we'll see. That's for later. Hello, everyone. I'm Tara. This is Benjamin. This is Morbid Symptoms podcast. This is become a regular segment. We have the U.S. Game of Thrones 2024 election, and you might have noticed, for those of you who follow the channel or my X account, that I've gotten really into connecting all the major players to some character in Game of Thrones or House of Dragons. And I just want to say, for those of you who are really into the books, I haven't read the books. I've seen the series. So I appreciate that there could be some details that I'm getting wrong. And these are not direct things. I just have to pick somebody. So if I'm like, if you're pissed that I'm, besmirching somebody by connecting them to somebody who isn't worth the dust on their boots or their skirts, then please excuse me. But what can we do? On that note, before we get into, so this is how it goes. Benjamin Veris Studebaker. And I also found out that his nickname was the Spider. Ooh. So I guess he's just kind of creepy. So yeah. So he's in the nooks and crannies. He's paying attention. I'm like, all right. I'll have to find a cool spider graphic. The only one I could find looked really cartoonish, and I was like, no. That's not how Benjamin rolls or Varys rolls. So we can't do that. But how this works is I've just been keeping an eye out for funny or interesting, sad, what the actual AF and etc. regarding the U.S. election. And I'm going to put first I'm going to get just obviously Benjamin's initial, take his temperature at what's going on here. And then what I do is I just put up the slide. I share my screen. I put up the slide and he gives his take. And then I give my take to his take. I realize that he's the main course here. So I'll try to limit my things to, whatever. But I'm here too. And I have things to say. But I'm also most interested in getting Benjamin's take. So that's how it is. He hasn't seen these things before, although, they're online and around. It's not like I have secret access to some, Homeland Security Archive or CIA special operation. Unfortunately, anybody out there who wants to share that with me, that it won't get me killed, please, do, and I won't mention who I got it from. All right, before we get into getting your take on the U.S. Game of Thrones 2024 election, what's your temperature on this? Any kind of general statements since we've talked the last 2 weeks? Going to be VP pick, exciting VP pick.
Yeah, I think the VP pick is the thing that in the first week was really standing out. And I'm sure we'll talk about the VP pick. The thing in the most recent week that I have been noticing people talking about and thinking about is just how weak the Trump campaign's response has been to the switch to Harris and to the VP pick. A lot of the rhetoric coming out of the campaign sounds like stuff that we would associate with the 2012 era Mitt Romney Republican establishment. They're calling the Harris campaign communists over and over, like they used to do with Obama, Obamunism, and that Glenn Beck thing where he would do the Affordable Care Act, and each of the letters would be a stand-in for some Marxist Leninist trope.
Oh yeah, the code.
We seem to be back into that kind of territory. And I think what that says is people have said, Trump has taken over the Republican Party, but that was never really the case. What happened is that the Republican Party took over Trump. And all of the books about that administration focus on, there really being three different core factions within the Trump administration, right? One is that Steve Bannon alt-right out there faction that people think of immediately when they think of Trump. But the other is, the second is the Reince Priebus establishment GOP, Mitt Romney side of it. And those people are, if anything, I think playing a much larger role this time than before. And then the third is the family. It's, Ivanka and Jared, and they're basically Democrats. They're soft Democrats with relatively liberal positions on many social issues. And in terms of the internal politics of it, those three forces were always in conflict within the Trump administration, and the Bannon side of it tended to lose and lost a lot. And I think a lot of people have memory hold all of that. They have not remembered that the Trump administration was itself host to internal conflict. And it's easier to oppose the thing if you can just say, it's all Steve Bannon. It's all, very, very far right out there stuff. But in practice, it didn't govern that way. It doesn't behave that way. And we're seeing that now because what's making the campaign so incompetent is this establishment Republican messaging that has taken over it.
Yeah, I also was. I saw. I think it was the last ad, or maybe there. Of course, this is what counts as big news in this campaign. Was like Trump tweeted on X or posted on X, and it was some ad, and it was real. And I thought, okay, let's see what he's going to do. And I was like, well, this is a yawn. And I'm not. I can enjoy both sides attack ads because I don't like. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, so I can. And it was all border. It was all basically, like you said, it's trying to paint her as some sort of, just like border, tax and spend, vote for Trump. I'll keep you safe. This was I was like, oh, okay.
She said she's going to make you pay for healthcare and free healthcare and free housing for all these immigrants. It's basically, it's the same messaging as 2012, but for all these immigrants is attached at the end.
Yeah. Well, and someone would have to pay. I guess everyone's against healthcare now. Or I mean, I guess that used to be wink, wink, welfare queens. That's why you don't want to pay. That's why you shouldn't want this program that actually, if people worked it out, would be useful single payer or not something, a national health service of some sort. But first it was because, but then all these freeloaders, there was in the Reagan era, the welfare queen, all that, and now. That's too on the nose for them to. That's too much of a dog whistle. But they can blame immigrants, illegal immigrants.
They've switched from the welfare queen to the illegal
immigrant. That's why we
can't
have these things.
Yeah, and
it's not because they want you to have them. It's because they need to woo the people they want to replace you and their plan to win elections by. It's this kind of just this old school patronage thing. Like, come over
the
the
real weakness
border
of
and we'll give
Harris,
you some stuff and you can vote and maybe fight in these wars we want to have. Come on.
the
It's
real
both sides
weakness
of
of
like that, I
Harris
think.
is the 2019 total flip-flopping on Medicare for all that she did in front of everybody very publicly, where she said completely contradictory things within days, in 2019. But if he's going to say, actually she's really dedicated to Medicare for all and she'll give health care to immigrants, I mean, for one, it's not even remotely close to being true. For two, it's a much less effective line of attack than to point out that she's totally incoherent and has no principles or values or beliefs of her own.
Yeah, like I agree with you. Said they're making her they're making her into more than she is. Rather, which is I don't know. It's an interesting choice. Either that's how they see everybody, and it's an old recipe, so they want to use it. But I'm like, they're trying to make her into this like. I'm like, I don't see it.
Which is the same thing that they were doing to him, right? They were saying he's fascism, he's going to destroy democracy. And they can all recognize that when the Democrats use those kinds of lines, it's not very effective on their guy. And now they're nonetheless using the same kind of lines on Harris, even though those lines are not going to serve them any better.
Yeah, it's like, don't look at the guy behind the curtain making all this stuff up, or the teams behind the curtain. No, Kamala has the interest and the capacity to do this, and is a secret communist because her dad taught some classes on Marxism at college. I mean, it's like
and that's what they did with Obama, right? They tried to connect him to Saul Alinsky. They tried to connect him to radical figures as part of trying to, and none of that worked.
Yeah, and he was neoliberal down the line. I mean, the most yeah. So that's
Trump, by the way.
Well, yeah. But no, I think that they're both making it. They're both building up these huge monsters so they can make their guy look, I guess, I don't know, to scare people or to make them. I don't know. But I'm just not buying it.
Neither of them have anything positive to promise. So it's all fear narratives, right? If you can't get people to believe in any kind of hope, and the Trump campaign really struggles to do that because he's been president, he's run an administration. People's lives were not wonderful in the Trump administration. All the problems of capitalism.
That's not what I've heard. I thought everything was great. No inflation. Economy's never been better. There was no wars. We weren't killing anybody.
Yeah, and everything that isn't consistent with that, right? He just blames on COVID. In the Biden-Trump debate, they were constantly just saying, well, anything that doesn't fit my narrative is because of COVID.
Yeah. But no. So these are just in case people who are watching. This is nothing too exciting. Brock Littlefinger, that still stays. I guess I don't know if we have too much to say about this. I mean, it just seems like he's on board. He was the last one to formally acknowledge what's her face? Sorry, the communist Stalin, Kamala Stalin. Harris, or maybe I don't know, or maybe she's Leon. I don't know, but anyway, but he's on board now, so I guess it's all systems rolling. And the last time we talked, you said you were quite impressed with how everybody came together behind Kamala, and I was wondering, there was one theory, and I don't know, I can't remember who said this, so I'm not trying to steal it. I don't think it was mine. It probably was. I don't think it was. Is that Joe Biden was really, or maybe you told me this, and I'm just repeating back your own words to you. That could be it. But that Joe Biden was none too happy about what was going on. And so the reason why he was so quick to formally endorse Kamala is because he wanted to screw the traitors. It's like, okay, I'm going to leave you with Kamala. Good luck. You think there's any
that is a rumor that I
that?
heard. That is a rumor that I heard, and I think I did say that maybe on the last episode.
Okay,
a lot of that came out of Axios. This publication Axios, which has some ties to the Biden administration, put out a story about how upset Biden is that you can find. And Axios also put out a story critical of Harris, that it was forced to walk back after it got pressure from the party. If you want to get any kind of sense of what Biden thinks or what the Biden loyalists think about all of this, I would say Axios is the place to go where you have the best possible chance of hearing something unfiltered from
someone must
their
have
side.
someone must have a link to what's his name, Hunter or something. I don't know.
They've got
somebody.
I said last time who it was, but there's somebody who was part of founding Axios who is relatively high up in the Biden administration.
Yeah. Oh my God. See, this is how riveted I am, because the last conversation I've internalized, and it's like it's become my own. So hopefully I don't continue to do that, and you'll be like, what's with the rerun? Okay. Yeah, so we'll see. But apparently they're on board, and they've
I'm glad you brought it up, because there was another thing involving Axios in the last couple of weeks. Axios continues to be an interesting place for possible signs of dissent.
Ooh. Okay, so I have to keep an eye on Axios, people. All right, so yes, so this is still Joe Viserys Biden. I add the ice cream cone because it's dripping, because he likes ice cream. There's been he came out once or twice, but they've really been successful at clamping him down. And apparently nobody cares that he was too senile. I'll just use that word. I don't know what's going on with him, to run for president, but he's not too senile to be president. Apparently nobody cares about that. But
yeah, anyway. I think one of the nice things that has come out of this is that it's highlighted that the president is not as important as people generally prefer to believe. The president kind of humanizes and personates the system for people. And yet the president can be incapable of running for re-election, and nobody acts like it's an emergency or that the system can't function, which suggests it's much more bureaucratized, administrative, and robust than the way it's generally discussed.
Although I think psychologically, and it's hard to know if people are just saying this because they want to score points against the other side, but every once in a while you'll still see something like, where's the president? Who's the president? Who's running the country? What's going on here? And then, of course, the sky hasn't fallen. And I'm not saying things are great but the problems that we had,
they haven't gotten dramatically worse. Yeah, we have all sorts of intense problems, but a senile president doesn't make them much, much worse all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Okay, so that's good to know, I guess. So, which isn't too surprising that the system kind of is self-perpetuating. I mean, that's been a theory, not just from systems theory, but a long thing for a long time. That once enough people are just kind of doing what you do, the head is kind of not that it's not nothing, but it's kind of irrelevant. Which is not to segue into communism, but is also an argument for why at a certain point you don't have to be an ideological socialist or communist to look around and be like, why do we have all these upper management people? Why do we have all these day traders or investors who really aren't doing anything? I mean, but we'll put a pin in that. I don't want to scare people who are afraid of communists. Or whatever that means in their mind. So I added, since this has happened since we met.
Last time she used the line again. The I'm speaking line has come back.
Yeah. So Slay. So I'm speaking, and as I recall, she was giving some speech, and of course this is going to happen. That pro-Palestinian or whatever they're calling themselves, pro-ceasefire, anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian protesters started to, I think it was a group of younger women, say something, ceasefire now, or why are you supporting? I can't remember exactly what they said, but they weren't like shouting epithets at her or, storming the stage. And she basically was like, I'm speaking. So basically, like, you should be quiet. I'm speaking. And
say that if you want Trump to win, right? Because I'm speaking, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
If you want Trump to win, keep saying that. Yeah, and that does seem to be the Harris line. If you are criticizing the Harris-Walz campaign, your only possible motivation in doing that is to make Trump win. The only thing you can accomplish by doing that is to make Trump win. And that's so obviously the wrong thing to be doing that your critique is invalidated because it has that effect. That seems to be the line of argument.
Well, yeah, and this was the same thing that they used with, I think, they've been using this since Hillary. is that, what do you want, Trump? Like, what are you talking about? Or Joe Biden, when he was with Charlemagne the God, saying, if you don't vote for me, you ain't really black, or whatever he said. And this idea that, that either you don't really care about what's going on in Gaza, and the U.S. Finishing the weapons and all, and the diplomatic cover for that. Either you really don't care about that, you just want to get Trump elected, or you care about it, but you're stupid because you're going to limit of course, you have better chances with Kamala than with Trump, which is also, if you compare how either Democratic or Republican administrations have handled Israel, there's not a lot of daylight. I mean, there was rumors, maybe there wasn't rumors that Netanyahu and Obama didn't get along very well, but he certainly didn't stop. He certainly didn't stop sending the checks and the tanks and the missiles and all that.
Another way in which this echoes the 2012 Mitt Romney cycle, Netanyahu in 2012 campaigned publicly for Romney. Made interventions in English, for the American audience on behalf of Romney. That was an early instance of foreign interference in the election.
Well, he didn't say it in Russian, or his native Polish. If he had done that,
that was before we were talking about this idea that countries should never say anything or do anything to try to influence the elections in other countries. This arbitrary principle that emerged out of 2016 that no country has ever followed at any point with any kind of consistency. I think that one of the things that is going on here is that they have kind of tried to turn this into a Manichaean good versus evil thing. And good doesn't have to argue with evil, because evil should be self-evidently worse than good. And if evil isn't self-evidently worse than good, then that could only be because you yourself are in some way confused.
Yeah.
So they don't have to make an argument, because to make an argument would be to suggest that it's more complicated than good versus evil. So to even make an argument from their point of view would be to undercut the message that they really have, which is that the Trump campaign is fundamentally evil.
Yeah, and if you can't see that, then there's something wrong with you. Yeah, there's something wrong with you, or you need to get with the program, or
there's something wrong with your soul if you can't see it.
Yeah. And they turned this, which is good. You have to appreciate the fact that both sides, not missing out on a marketing opportunity, have turned "I'm speaking" into turn that possible. And of course, people would like that, because you have to handle. You're going to have protesters. You're going to have, whether it be, I'm sure this was of course, the Palestinian Israel issue is going to come up, but there's going to be other issues. So how she's going to handle that, and apparently this is how she's going to do it. She's going to be like, "I'm speaking," like, how dare you? And which is one way of going about it. I mean, I don't know any politician who would just, I guess she could invite them up and have like a sit down talk, or say, "Hey, let's get together later after the event and actually do that." But she's going to have to come up with something. Apparently this is her go-to thing, which worked for her. That didn't seem, that to me, it didn't seem, that seemed genuine, like how she would react. But here we have Stephen King
how it played.
wearing the t-shirt. They're selling this now. "I'm speaking."
Right. Because immediately afterwards, the team complicated the message and said that, of course, she cares about it and wants a ceasefire and is trying to negotiate it and da-da-da-da-da. So the team walked it back a little bit after the fact to try to emphasize that she does care about the issue, because her response was brusque enough that it could give the impression that she just doesn't care at all, right? If she's saying that any critique is just in support of Trump, functionally at least, if not deliberately, then it sounds as if she doesn't care about any of the issues that people in the base care about. So they did see a need to walk that back a bit. He's wearing the poster that's got a kind of version of the famous Obama image on it. One thing that's interesting, is that the artist who commissioned the famous Obama poster has done a new piece of art, I believe, for Harris.
It's coming up, yes.
So they are deliberately trying to do a bit of that, but not to the point of picking Shapiro as VP, right? Because Shapiro does this bad Obama impression that everybody has been subjected to, and it's very clearly a fake voice that he learned how to do deliberately. It is clearly not his real voice. That is not how he talks.
Yeah.
I am sure in private he speaks in a different way. But he has, for the purposes of his political career, cultivated an Obama voice. So the people who wanted the campaign to just be full-on Obama nostalgia, a lot of those people were keen on picking Shapiro, in part because his entire aesthetic connotes that. But the campaign didn't go in that direction. However, as is so often the case, right? If you don't go in a direction, you still want to give a sop to whoever it is, right? So they didn't pick Shapiro, but they go and make a new Obama-style poster for Harris. So there's still a likening there without the overtness of going with Shapiro. In the same way, the party as a whole does not pick someone who's at all interested in any kind of reform as the head of the ticket, but then they go get Walz, a Minnesota DFLer. And the party always
Benjamin,
does this.
Are you gonna steal my my screenshot thunder here?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, if we've got a Walz screenshot, let's do that.
No, but yeah, I was like, I have that. So
yeah,
I definitely want to hear that. But yeah, so
but at a later stage.
Yes, soon. Okay, yeah. So because and I think this is just a different way of maybe saying what you just said. Yeah, they want to be like, they want to throw back. Like, remember how good it felt when Obama won and we had the Obama family in the White House, and how good we felt about ourselves and the country. And don't you want that again? We could do that. We can have that again. It can be, it can be part 2, but this time with a woman. So that's cool. But I kept on thinking, like, fool me once Obama, fool me twice Kamala. It's kind of like, been there, done that. And again, she doesn't have, of course, this is, when was that? He ran in 2008 the first time. Yeah. This is quite a few years later. And, we've had that, but it's like, she doesn't have the gravitas. She doesn't have the public speaking thing. She doesn't have that Obama, and I don't dispute the fact that he governed like down the line like a neoliberal, and then he also let people project onto him whatever. But it just seems like, I think they're forgetting, and this goes back to what you've said, that this only works as long as she stays something in somebody's head. As soon as we have to deal with the real Kamala, all this stuff they're trying to, all this land of make believe, and becomes difficult to sustain, especially when I'm speaking, if she's kind of doing mean girl. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but I just don't think they're going to be
I just think the whole thing was really funny online, seeing these people on the left embrace the cope of, well, they picked Walz rather than Shapiro, right? To make up for the fact that you've got Harris as the nominee of the party. And they were throwing around these copes like, oh, the Democratic Party, they always run, whoever the VP is, always eventually runs for president. So maybe one day Walz will be president. This deep, deep cope that they're in. And what it is it's sops within sops, right? So the sop to the left.
Sops, what do you mean by that?
So a sop is like a placater. It's something you give somebody to shut them up and placate them.
Like a pacifier. Yeah,
right.
Okay, a sop.
Right. So the sop to the left.
I want to make sure you weren't saying psyop, which is similar.
No, like a sop, like a.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a placater. It's a pacifier, right?
Okay.
So the pacifier for the left is the VP.
A goodie, yeah. Okay.
Right. But of course, they still give a sop to the people who want Obama by redoing the art, right? So you'll still get a lot of the aesthetic, you'll get a lot of the Obama style campaigning, and that's a sop within a sop, because of course Harris's politics is very Obama. Her actual substantive politics is very neoliberal Obama.
Yeah.
So the actual substance of what you're getting will be that. But there was this need to give a sop to this part of the left that can be bought off by the VP, this very, very sycophantic, weak part of the left that will just do whatever the Democrats want. If they get a sop, they just need a sop. And not only that, I don't know if you saw the video or the GIF that was going around of the guy pulling the train. So there's a man on a subway who's pretending that he controls the train. So as the train comes to a halt, he grabs the train as if he's slowing the train down. And as the train takes off, he runs along and pushes the train as if he's the one pushing it. And on video, it almost looks as if this is the case. And this video was made to make fun of some people in the DSA who were acting as if the left had in some way compelled the Democrats to pick walls with their structural power that they have within the party or within the voting base. And it's this kind of sop that allows these people to pretend that they're part of something. And
no, I've been blocked by the DSA. That's neither here nor there. And it wasn't even, if I knew they were so sensitive, I would have like really, gotten more, but it was really, I thought, fairly mundane, but not about this. It was something about their COVID. It was something about, anyway, but, yeah.
The DSA has an unusually strong concentration of hardcore COVID people.
Well, what it was is I think
COVID
they
activists.
It's kind of funny. I wasn't expecting this to come up, but so yeah, anything on the DSA account, I don't see on the main one. It was, I don't know. I think it was like their first big brouhaha after the lockdown, and it was like, and I don't know if it was right before. I don't know. It must have been during the last presidential election, and the pictures they chose to show were the kind of most beta, mask wearing, glove wearing, and by beta I mean just says that that's men and women, whatever. And they're showing that this as like this is like the face case for this organization. I was like, are you trying to deflate numbers? What if this says anything?
The mask wearing, it's a very diehard. Yeah, they have a kind of diehard commitment to politics from the previous decade that no party has taken up, and they operate under this delusion that they're going to eventually get the Democrats to do what they want, and of course it's not happening. But one of the ways in which this quixotic delusion manifests is that they're still wearing the masks, they're still trying to do 2020 era COVID politics.
They're going to push Kamala to the left.
Yeah, of course, just like they did with Biden. Right?
I understand, because I keep on saying that they're going to push people to the left, but the people keep on getting further from the left, and I get confused.
Well, then to try to keep people engaged, they have to take credit for stuff that they had nothing to do with, and it's increasingly obvious that they have nothing to do with anything that's happening. And if you could be bought off by a Minnesota DFLer, if that's enough, I mean, in 84 they nominated Mondale, in 80 they made Mondale Jimmy Carter's, in 76, they made Mondale Jimmy Carter's VP, right? And Mondale did absolutely nothing. Nothing to stop Jimmy Carter from appointing Paul Volcker chairman of the Fed. And what did Paul Volcker do? He started jacking up the interest rate, destroying the economy in 80, right? And that was all, and all of the deregulation, all of the neoliberal austerity, it all begins with Carter. And did Mondale do anything to stop that? No. Did Humphrey, is Humphrey some kind of great, achievement? He's another Minnesota DFLer who was the VP for Johnson to try to be a sop to people who didn't like Johnson because he was from the South. This technique of getting some Minnesota DFLer to balance the ticket ideologically, the Democrats have been doing this for 50 years, and these people are still getting fooled by it.
Yeah. Well, they must want to then. I think we want change, but not really. And
they
I think
want to be fooled by it.
Yeah, maybe this is what got me. I think in the thing, I think I even started off with like some. You start off with the nice, like if you're giving comments at a presentation at the university, like okay, you start off with like, well, that was interesting, and you say the good stuff, and then you get into the critique you want to make. And I think I said something like, I've been to Elks clubs, looked more exciting. Or something like that, and or this isn't even get to the level of an Elks Club on a Wednesday night, and that was actually not fair to the Elks Club, because I've been to Elks Clubs with the family members, and they can be pretty hopping, and I was like, this is just like the most depressing thing I've ever seen in my life. I didn't say it quite that bad, but it was enough for them to block me. Whew. I thought, well, not that I was going to become a member again, but I was just like...
Were you a member at one point?
Oh, yeah. When I was in university. Yeah. And I just kind of stumbled upon a really cool intro to sociology by some hardcore, Marxist dude. And then I also stumbled into a intro to women's studies. It was also from like a materialist feminist type of thing. And so then I was like, okay, I want to get, and I'm looking around.
What year did you join the DSA and what year did you quit?
Okay, I joined. I think that it was probably because there was a cute dude involved when I went to the WTO protests in Seattle. And then by the time, and then after I graduated, after my bachelor's degree, I went overseas actually went overseas and never really came back. But anyway, and then after that, I just kind of let it lapse, and I was just like, I'm not, and I have yet to find a party that I can get excited about. Everywhere I go, I try to check out something that sounds like it might be up my alley that I could contribute to. And I just find stuff that just seems like glorified book clubs by some people that are kind of, I don't know. It just seems like they can't generate anything on their own. So they have to wait for something to pop off someplace and show up with their pamphlets or something.
Yeah, a lot of it's talking shops.
Yeah, which is fine. But it's like okay, cool. Or I have been in other countries, and that's also a bit of a pickle because I just still find it's kind of rude to, like, if it's like, for example, when Brexit was going on, I have a lot of feelings about Brexit, but I was like, okay, I'm not gonna get into that when I was in the UK. And then when I was in Holland, there was some stuff going on when all the PMCs and the universities were freaking out because the right was gaining ground. They really couldn't figure out why that was. And I was like, well, I could, give you some insights. But it's kind of weird when you're, it's when you're a resident, but you're not a citizen. It's just, anyway, enough about me. But yeah, so I briefly was like, oh, Democratic Socialists for America. And I was like, and then I was like, oh, like I just, read Capital Volume 1 and Simone de Beauvoir and all that, and I was just like, yes. And at that point I wanted to become a union, a labor law attorney, and I was going to fight for the unions. But I grew up in a union family, but not like, they weren't Marxist unionists. They were just regular, like Teamster union and Warehouser union. It wasn't like, at least my dad and everybody who I ever came across, no one mentioned anything about anything remotely red. But we were about getting, good wages and benefits and whatnot. So I was going to do that for a while, and then that kind of went to the wayside. But yeah, so I briefly thought this was really interesting because compared to what I remember, I was living with my grandma at the time. Because when I turned 18, I wanted to move to the big city. So I moved to Portland, Oregon, and my grandma was there, and I lived with her for a year. Anyway, and it was during the first election that I was going to get to vote in. And so I was going to, and my grandma was very serious. So we watched the Democratic convention together, and we watched the Republican convention together. And I was like, for a while, I was kind of on the fence, because when you're watching the convention, you give yourself over to it. And I was 18, so what did I know? And I was like, oh, But then when I started to go to college and got more, kind of by accident got into more, interesting theory or interesting politics, I was like, yeah, I can't. The DNC isn't going to cut it for me. So for a brief moment in time, I thought the DSA might be something actually potent. And now I realize that, and maybe then they actually had something. I don't know, but it had socialist in the title.
That cycle? Who were when you were 18? Who were the nominees? What cycle
Clinton.
Was it? Yeah.
My first vote for president was for Bill Clinton. Yeah.
As opposed to Bush or Dole?
Yes, as opposed to Bush.
As opposed to Bush.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was, but I had to tell you, I was not, because at that point, I didn't grow up in a hardcore either or family. And so it was just like, so again, I'm assuming that my parents were more liberal than conservative, but who knows? I think in terms of union stuff, very much pro-union, but culturally, I think fairly conservative. So who knows? But they never talked about it. Yeah, there was never a discussion about politics in my house, and so you can imagine how they love me.
Yeah, 92 Yeah, 92 was a tough cycle because nobody ended up getting a very high percentage of the popular vote. I think Bill Clinton won that election with 43%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Yeah, but I remember my grandma was very serious about it, but she's always kind of very serious lady. She's also very good with her money and watching the stuff. She, had a nest egg that she could give all her 6 kids and grandkids something in her will, and she was a waitress her whole life. So, anyway, Charlotte Vogel was a great grandma. Rest in peace. That was a segue. We'll cut that out later, people. Anyway, Joy. Speaking of sops or saps, sops for the saps.
The Democrats, of empty signifiers.
Yeah, yes. The Democrats put this out yesterday. No, August 17th. Oh, that's today, yeah? Or was it yesterday? Harris Waltz ticket is bringing back the joy. Okay.
Yeah, now we're getting into this is similar to the whole be kind thing. It's a really, really empty abstraction that has no obvious content. It's very kind of LeClau populist, totally empty, stick whatever you want in it.
Yeah, I mean, I was also like, Walt seems like he seems like he'd make a good, okay, fine, you could be at the barbecue on the 4th of July. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, he's the sop.
Yeah, and he's a bit too excited about giving minors unlimited access to hormones, but that's a different story. He does it out of love. I'm sure it's out of love. But to bring back the joy, I'm like, of what? Of the Obama years or something? It's like, but I guess maybe just because they know that their base is tired, and I don't mean like the whole like liberal base, but like the Democrat, blue no matter who, maybe, or used to be blue no matter who. They're just tired of this, and they really just want to be able to enjoy and feel good.
Oh yeah, there's a real invitation here.
Maybe
if you
that's
can get
what it
yourself
is.
to believe it, right? If you can get yourself to think of her as the second coming of Obama, and you can tell yourself a story about how Obama was great, but was just frustrated by the Republicans throughout his entire presidency. You can concoct this narrative that, if you just give yourself over to this meme magic, just give yourself over to it and you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And you'll get more out of that than you will out of anybody running for president, because nobody's going to do anything material for you. So you might as well take the sop that you can get.
Yeah. And I can see it working for people who aren't living paycheck to paycheck, who aren't thinking they're never going to be able to move out of their parents' house, or they're ever going to be able not to have 5 roommates or whatever that is. Not that it couldn't work with other people like that, other people, but I'm just like, who? Yeah. But I saw this and I was like, it's almost like they're trying. I don't know if they're trying to convince themselves or they're trying to, if they're trolling people. I mean, again, it doesn't matter. The mental state of whoever.
This is for someone that wants to feel good about politics, wants to feel good about the Democratic Party, doesn't want to think too much about it, likes positivity, thinks that negativity is a kind of bullying inherently, that criticism is inherently something you shouldn't be doing. There are a lot of Americans that are like that. A lot of Americans have this attitude that being in a negative headspace is just wrong on some level, that it's just not what you should be doing, and that positivity is always to be respected or valued. And if you have that kind of mindset, it is a great armor you can wear against anybody who might try to make anything even slightly better.
Yeah, it's almost like you have the Horatio Alger meant The Secret or something. So you have one side that you're supposed to, like you don't want handouts, you make your own way. And then you have the other side, like, well, you shouldn't have these negative thoughts and you should be positive and, your glass should be half full. And, it's like,
everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds.
Yeah. So this combination of, I don't know. So here's
Leibnizian naturalizing of the hellscape of capitalism.
Yeah. Just that, don't. It's kind of like the worst possible interpretation of the AA thing. Like, accept what you can't change, and try to be happy with it or make your peace with it. I mean, it's like turn that frown upside down, and we get to vote for a woman, and she's a BIPOC, and that's cool, and and Beyonce will probably perform at the DNC, and she might, she might be positive about it. She might shake that ass, come on.
And if you refuse to be positive about it, then they immediately switch into what? Do you want Trump to win? Are you evil?
Yeah. Or what's wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, what's wrong with you? You have to take the empty-headed positivity, and if you refuse to accept it, then you're in the basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
That is the whole Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's
strategy.
like, why do you want to put a turd in our punch bowl, man?
Why are you ruining the fun?
Why are you ruining the joy?
Yeah. Why aren't you being kind to the first woman president? Do you hate women? Do you hate people of color? Who do you hate? Why? Why do you have issues?
Yeah. You need to
What's
work
wrong
on
with
being
you
a better
psychologically?
ally. You have unacknowledged privilege, or you're giving away privilege feels like a sacrifice. Yeah.
You need a struggle session. You need self-criticism. All of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And people, and then there's a whole market for that, which is great. So Colin Rugg, I think he's in the bag for Trump. I'm not sure. So I guess Karine Jean-Pierre can't give an answer after a reporter asked her to name Kamala Harris's biggest achievement as vice president. No achievements, no policy. Okay, I also want to say that you can judge me for what I've chosen to get Benjamin's comment on, but just so you know, I could agree, disagree. I could have all kinds of feelings about these things. So no achievements, no policy, and she won't even sit down for an interview. Reporter, what does Biden see as the vice president's biggest achievement? KG Pay. I'm not going to parse out anything.
Well, I will say, in fairness, most vice presidents don't have any achievements. And it's something people should remember when they try to get excited about walls. Most vice presidents don't accomplish anything. Because most vice presidents are there as a sop to some part of the base that you're not really including in the administration in a substantive sense.
But at the same time, they do. Oftentimes, it's a springboard to run for president. Yeah, because people get used to associating you with the Oval Office, with this type of thing.
Yes, and that's the cope that the left is leaning on with walls. However, very often the person who is VP, while they will run, will not ultimately succeed. Right? Pence didn't get the nomination. Dick Cheney never ran for office. Among the Democrats, the argument is made that the Democrats are more consistent in giving the VP a slot at the top of the ticket. And that is true historically. However, many of those VPs never actually succeed in winning, including every previous Minnesota DFLer, Humphrey, Mondale, and now Walz, right? And also, Al Gore didn't successfully become the nominee either. Well, he did become the nominee. He didn't successfully become president either.
Yeah.
There very, very rarely does it actually happen that somebody actually is VP, runs for president, and then wins. It doesn't happen often, in part because by the time you get there, people are tired of that stuff. And a lot of the time, if somebody does manage to win in that situation, a lot of the one-term presidents are former VPs. A lot of them are.
It's true.
Biden, for instance, also George H.W. Bush, Reagan's VP, right? And a lot of our least popular presidents are people who were VPs. Harry Truman ended his presidency, with very terrible numbers. Occasionally, somebody makes it work.
But he did leave with that morsel of the military-industrial complex, right? That was Harry Truman, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that was the.
I'm not saying that means that he was great. I'm just
state. Yeah, I mean, he did certainly contribute significantly to constructing all of that. Yeah.
He also let it happen, but people tend to leave.
And a lot of it happened under pressure from the Republicans, right? Because there was this Red Scare, and there was all this pressure on Truman to demonstrate that he was committed to rooting out Reds within the Roosevelt administration. And it was in large part because of the relative political weakness of Truman that he acquiesced to a lot of these demands. And then he goes into Korea and he is absolutely hell-bent on winning in Korea because he doesn't want to look weak, because he's been taking all this criticism from the Republicans for having lost China to the communists. And similar kinds of things with Kennedy and Johnson. They were under this enormous amount of critical pressure all the time for looking soft in the Cold War. And it caused them to, if anything, be more hardline and to get involved in a lot of stupid conflicts and to escalate them in ways that were very damaging. Because they were so intent on trying to prove that they were serious about fighting the communists.
All right. So the last time, see the richness you get on Morbid Symptoms, particularly when, with lots of my guests, but including Benjamin. Nice little segues, historical anecdotes. I like it. Anyway, the last time we were together, we talked about White Dudes for Harris. I don't know if you saw any of the clips from those Zoom sessions, but it's still a thing. They're not backing down, the White Dudes for Harris. Obviously, and King is like, they probably all have the I'm Speaking t-shirt, or they have the picture of where, what's his name? Tim Waltz is always like pointing. His job is
if anything, they're now breaking it down into further demographic groups. We're hearing a lot of people making old racist and ethnic arguments about different types of Europeans. And that's going on. There's I think a Jewish Women for Harris group now.
Oh, nice.
And so they've even done that. And then the Vance people keep talking about different ethnic constituencies of white people. They keep talking about German immigrants, some of these people, to try to slander Walls as a German, as a Bavarian, and not a real American. Because
I wonder if that's how they're gonna. I wonder if that's how they're.
Sorry.
I wonder if that's how they're going to. I don't know how. This probably is the same thing in Indiana. Maybe it's all over the place in the States. But I remember that, for those of you who aren't Americans, oftentimes people say, "Oh, my family came from Ireland," or "I'm an Irish," even though they have never lived. Let's just say Ireland, or I'll use my case of Denmark, because there's on my dad's side a lot of my dad's parents were both Danish, and their parents were both Danish, and I can't remember 2 generations or 3 generations ago they came over the Oregon Trail. Anyway. Other anecdote. However, so lots of Danish people, or people who say I should say, how to say this. How do you say this? There's a big part of my family that really embraces and is excited about their Danish heritage. Let's say that.
Yeah, identifies as Danish.
Yeah. And so there's usually once or twice a year there's festivals, and these are big, big for these smaller towns. And so I wonder if that's how I wonder if there's some sort of beef to that. So he's going to go around, maybe avoid the larger areas, and maybe they're going to have him go to these really niche, like heritage days or Danish days or German days or whatever it is, Irish, et cetera, where people in America pretend that somehow there's something Danish in the blood, even though they've never been to. I'll use my thing as an example, and I'm not against people who like the Vikings and they like the food, whatever it is. But you get this idea that you actually start thinking and feeling like you literally are Danish. And I'll use my family as an example, even though they haven't been to Denmark, their parents haven't been to Denmark, and now I think it's up to my great grandparents. I think they're the ones who are the first generation Americans. So it's like. I mean, it's cool. I mean, it's nothing wrong with it, but when it becomes an electoral strategy, that's interesting. This idea that somehow there's something essentially like the Danish American voter or the Scottish American voter or the German.
This used to be something
3 or 4 or 5 generations ago, even
anti-Catholic sentiment and WASP supremacist sentiment has been in American politics for a long time. And one of the things that's really sad and sick and racist about the whole election is that the Vance people have brought this kind of language back in. And the thing is, the liberals invited it because they praised hillbilly elegy, which was chock full of this kind of ethnicist language, suggesting that Scots-Irish people with Scots-Irish heritage are different culturally from other kinds of white immigrant or
even
migrant
to this
groups.
day, yeah.
That was in hillbilly elegy, and all these liberal critics praised it. How wonderful to break American whiteness down into these different ethnic groups and throw old stereotypes at them and see what sticks. This kind of shit was praised by all of these liberals when that book came out, just because it gave them an excuse to talk about something other than capitalism. They were willing to just run into old-fashioned ethnic, internecine race baiting, just to avoid talking about the economy. And now they pretend like it's unacceptable to them that Vance is doing it, when they all praised it in his book, and it was all there in the original book.
Well, I was thinking, and I forgot to clip this for you, but I remember it. There was someone who was complaining about, because now people are parsing his book, trying to find factual errors. And there's this thing coming out now because I guess his Meemaw and Peepaw or whatever, who I guess remain. Again, I didn't read the book or watch the movie, but I guess his grandparents are a big part of this book. And he talked about how they, I guess, persevered, never got divorced. So now it's coming out that they actually once or twice filed for divorce, but never got divorced. And this is some sort of scandal. So someone actually saw, oh, wait a minute. He was going on about how resilient his Meemaw and Peepaw's marriage were, but now we find out that they thought about getting a divorce twice. And of course,
it's incredible to me. People think that's what matters.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me that they read that book, which is riddled with ethnic prejudice and hatred of working class people, clear, obvious resentment toward working class people that he feels don't work as hard as him or aren't as dedicated as he is. That people read that book and then they talk about this totally unrelated stuff that is not important. Who cares if he gets all the facts about his family history right? Who cares, right? You know, like the most significant story related to hillbilly elegy is the story about the couch, which is entirely made up. It's somebody, imagined and invented a quote. Well, originally there was a guy who made a tweet, right?
Yeah.
And the tweet said, on this page of Hillbilly Elegy, he admits to having done this, right? Now, if you go to that page of Hillbilly Elegy, there's nothing about that on that page. It's completely made up, right? It's just totally fabricated. It never took place. But nevertheless, as part of labeling him a weird person who would do something like that, they ran with this fake story. The thing that gets me is that book has so many major issues with it. And yet our political class, our political culture in the United States is so degenerated that it doesn't recognize this pile of ethnic prejudice and hatred of poor and working class people as something to be ashamed of or as a problem in any regard whatsoever.
No, and that's why, and thank you for jumping on that. I knew that would get you going because I was going to get there, or I was going to set you up for that, but I didn't need to set you up for it. Because my first thing was, well, first of all, this is stupid because he's still factually correct. His grandparents didn't get divorced. Thinking about getting divorced and filing for divorce, but not getting divorced. It's like either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant, you're divorced, you're not divorced, they still aren't divorced. And then I put something into along those lines about, that, but of course, the left isn't going to talk about, or the Democrats aren't going to talk about that because they also like to shit on these people. Yeah. And so they're certainly not going to, they're all for, that it's some sort of weird ethnic mix or the culture of poverty. That's really what the issue is, not the, the economic precarity and deindustrialization, all this other stuff. That's not it. It's this. And I thought about that, and your reaction last time popped in my head. I'm like, this is what they're going to go after with this book?
Yeah, they have no problem with making cultural stereotypes, ethnic arguments. Democrats have no problem with any of that. It's their whole shtick as well. So they're both just completely racist campaigns, totally racist parties. It's just sick. It's all very sick. And it's much worse than it used to be. It's very explicit now. They're not even ashamed of it. They used to be ashamed of it.
Oh, wait till what we end with. We're gonna add up the race numbers on the Green Party, because Jill Stein announced her vice president that has no name recognition. We're gonna compare the Trump Vance, Harris Waltz, and the Jill Biden thing. We're gonna add up their racial numbers. That's what we'll do at the end because it's all about race now. And so, well, that's the thing that's going on. But yeah, I just want to say two things. Is just that knocking on poor and working class white people, particularly from certain regions in the States, has always been okay to do. It's particularly okay now, but because they blame him for Trump or who knows what. But also, I just want to say as a guide that when I heard about J.D. Vance humping a couch, I thought that was so hilarious. And second of all, and I just want people who don't know how much time I think about these things, probably too much. I knew that if I had to pick a couch that was a sectional, because if you're gonna be a guy doing that to a couch, you need to have friction. Also, I don't know if it's true, but people forget that there were animals as well, and more than one guy has humped a couch, and probably a couple of girls have as well. I just want to put that out there. So people are saying it's weird. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We do lots of weird things, which is why you learn really early if you share a house with people that you need to knock on the door because there's things you don't want to see. And also people who are, working in emergency rooms, especially I guess the first couple of years, everybody has to do an emergency room rotation if they're going to be a medical doctor, at least if they're going to be a surgeon. And there's all kinds of stories about men going in there because they've gotten their parts stuck in something or damaged. So while I appreciate Benjamin clearing up the fact that there's no scene in Hillbilly Elegy of J.D. Vance humping a couch, I just want to say I'm sure that everybody poking fun at him is doing it because it's an accusation, because humans are, we're sexual and we're odd. Not that I've ever humped a couch.
The Democrats, they're so pro-LGBT, but object sexuality, that's to be made fun of.
Yeah, I mean, if you got to get the friction in there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of, at first I thought, what? And I didn't pay too much attention to that. I was like, why are people talking about the couch? And then Tim Waltz mentions that, and I looked and I'm like, okay, well, it's unfortunate. I go, if he was doing this now, if this is a story, like a recent story, yeah, that would be weird. But, I mean, I'm sorry. And you guys, anybody knows this. I don't want to know about it, but, people hump weird things.
It speaks
and
to
better
how,
a couch
how gay marriage
doesn't have to consent than,
right? Yeah, how gay marriage got instantiated was through an argument that was based on love, right? That gay people love the person that they're having sex with. So it's not different from, indeed, it's akin to heterosexual love. The reason that you could still make fun of Vance is that there is no one who would argue that he actually loves a couch.
Yeah,
or that object sexual people who are object sexualists actually love the objects that they are sexually attracted to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, human sexuality. It's a trip. That's why I'm always like, well, I grew up, it's just like I had siblings and whatnot, but also, if you have roommates and especially whatever, it's like you learn really quick that lock your door, knock on the door. There's things you don't want to see. Okay, let's see. And speaking of which, Tim, Mace, Tyrell, Waltz. I struggled. I was actually in Benjamin helped me with this because I was like, which character from Game of Thrones or House of Dragon am I gonna put Tim with? And first I thought Samwell, not because I want to be mad about Samwell, but Samwell just seems so nice that I could see him kind of going along and doing what the team needed, pointing at Kamala. Like anytime anybody applauds, he wants to make sure that he's there saying, I'm just here to, be her accessory, etc. But anyway, I think Mace Tyrell does fit. And the things that the thing that people, there was two issues that they came after him with, at least from the right media, or anyway, Team Trump or Team Republican, whatever. One was his, there was something about his military record that they didn't like. But the first one I want to get was especially with Megyn, what's her name? Megyn Kelly, about the trans kid stuff. Because apparently him and his wife are big supporters of the quote unquote trans kid. And big supporters about how, if you want to block your puberty, if you want cross-sex hormones, if you want a breast binder or anything like that, the parents don't need to be involved either. Big trans kids rights thing. So, and including mandatory, making sure that tampons just aren't in the girls' room in primary school and secondary school, but also in the boys' room. And so Megyn Kelly or somebody tried to get Tampon Tim to stick. I don't know if it did. So these are the only two things I found about him, was the tampon thing, and then also that Harris campaign quietly scrubs retired command sergeant major from Waltz's bio, and I think there was something about how it intimated that he was in combat, but actually it seems like did what he could to avoid going into combat situations.
We're back to the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth kind of stuff from 2004, trying to say something about a military record. And then, of course, you'll have different accounts depending on the politics of the people who served with him. Some of them will say he stood by them and did the right thing. Other people will say whatever helps to damage him because they don't agree with him politically. And who knows what actually happened and who really cares? What does it have to do with anything, really? It's another one of those stupid Swift Boat Veterans for Truth kinds of digs that has nothing to do with issues, right? And then, in keeping with the 2004 theme, let's talk about something to do with LGBT, right? In the case of the Bush run in 2004, all this chatter about are Kerry and Edwards gay? This
that was right.
Yeah,
I remember that.
And this is, the classic kind of Republican establishment, how they think about how to attack a candidate stuff that just became so totally ineffective over the course of the time they were doing it. So to me, it just illustrates that they have no ideas. They are trying these retread lines from the past. They're just totally bereft. Walz was tactically a very strong pick from the Harris campaign. Tactically, a very strong pick because he's an effective SOP. There's a chunk of people on the left who will believe that he will do things for them that he, of course, will never actually do. But they'll believe it, and they'll allow themselves to get enthusiastic about this campaign because he's on the ticket. The picture that he shows on his Twitter profile is him surrounded by children who are hugging him and smiling because
he just gave them all free hormones. That's why.
Well, in that case, it's free breakfast and lunch.
Right? Oh, that's free good though. That I would support. Kids in school. That I would support.
And this is the thing about him. You can find these little instances of him finding ways to do low-cost policies that aren't super transformative or anything, but they look good to someone who's liberal or progressive or even kind of soft socialist minded. They look like, nice programs that you would think a Democrat, in the old days would have been for. So there's a little bit of this. And Biden himself also echoed this kind of 70s Democrat who's committed to certain kinds of, bread and cheese on the table, economic policies. They're very small. The stuff that they actually propose these days are really tiny compared to what people used to talk about or what the Sanders campaign talked about, 4 or 8 years ago. But nevertheless, the left is so demoralized and is so desperate to feel good about voting against Trump that it will take these kinds of SOPs. And unfortunately for the
and
right,
feel good about itself,
the Republicans are so useless and ineffective in the way that they counter it. It's really stunning to me how they have chosen to obsess over this stupid stuff when all of their research, all of their experience from the last 20 years ought to have taught them that none of this stuff will be effective.
I know that, I guess I need to plug the, the more I continue on with the podcast and the Substack, the more I'm like, I really picked the right name for it. Because these morbid symptoms, it's just like, Jesus, here we go again. And it's like, we need, I don't know. And also the phrase, that's Marx, that first is tragedy, then is farce. We need something else now because things are not just coming back twice or once. It's like, okay, so it's tragedy, then farce, then I guess so it's a SOP now. It's like PSYOP, or just like, we just become like, each time it seems like it doesn't take more to get us to go through these motions. It takes less, which I think, is that surprising, or how would you? I don't know, because you would think
People's
that it would take more, but it actually takes less.
That people on the left, their expectations are falling. They are no longer think it's possible to do many things that as recently as 5 years ago they thought could be done. They have become really, because they've had to defend the Biden administration, many of them have felt in some way
compelled Obama
to defend it. And Obama, they have had to constantly rationalize lack of achievement. When originally, and you see this even at the beginning of the Biden administration, there was this historian from one of the British universities, I think Gersel.
Who,
Yeah, who said Biden understands that what the country needs is a second FDR who's going to transform he understands this.
That would have been nice.
This kind of, and Obama as an FDR figure that also was in a lot of the magazines and media immediately after he took office. There's always this, the next FDR is coming. But this, as it becomes more and more obvious each time that it's not the case, that it's not going to happen. The rationalizations just pile up.
And even when he does, or if he could, the right would call him a communist or her.
Well, that doesn't even, that's not even the stuff that actually is effective, right?
Yeah.
When they
but I mean, in terms of an FDR, an actual FDR is like, look, there's things we're going to need to do. At least this is the story that resonates with me. It was basically like that. Some people want to think that FDR was some sort of socialist. Far from it. It was like, we got to fine with capitalism, but we need to do these things or we're going to be screwed, et cetera, et cetera. And this idea that he realized, liberalism. To use Nancy Fraser, that you can't starve the host. The things that you need for capitalism to keep on going, you can't, starve them too much. You need to, keep it going a bit. But so I'm just saying that I don't want to jump the gun there. That even he.
That's a good line. You can't starve the host. Props to Nancy Fraser for that one.
Huh? Yeah. Well, that's mine.
Nancy Fraser. I thought it was from Nancy Fraser.
But it came from her, because she has that book, Cannibal Capitalism. Yeah. It came out So it's her idea. It's just, that the type of thing is that
you can't starve the host.
You can't. That's an old. I mean, that's just another way of talking about the contradictions. Yeah.
But it's a very
But I thought it useful.
Way of putting it.
Yeah. No,
it's a good phrase.
No, and I would recommend. Her last couple of books have been focused particularly on capitalism. I found quite useful because it's kind of at least not that I've read every book on the theory of crisis theory as it relates to capitalism, but from what I have read, it seems like she's taking it's actually an evolution. It's actually a development by So you can't. The capitalism has forgotten, or people who are in charge of it, or too many people who are in charge of manning this or womaning this ship have forgotten that you can't. There's certain things that capitalism needs to function, and if you starve those things, that it ends up being bad, and you can try
like that,
to
Hacker and Pearson book, American Amnesia. A lot of these books about how liberals have forgotten how liberalism ultimately functions.
Thank you. That was the idea, and I think that's also Chris Hedges, but he doesn't come from a political economy thing. It's like liberalism for the longest time was like a bulwark in between these things. It was a check on that,
or the Robert Reich book, Saving Capitalism. There are a lot of Stiglitz, Joe Stiglitz, Bill Clinton's old economic advisor, on the problem economic inequality poses for capitalism. There are a lot of these defenses of capitalism that say what's necessary is to get back into some kind of post-war Keynesian reform posture.
Yeah. But with Nancy, she also brings in the care. So she looks at anyway.
Again, because she's not one of those people. Nancy Fraser has socialist politics, as I understand.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, so on that note, and if you ever do read, or if you have read her two books, so I'd like to get your take on them. I thought it was really, but I wasn't when the last two. I think it was her. There was a book on capitalism, a theory, and it was kind of like the book was like a dialogue between her and this, I think it's a German woman, but it was mainly like it was her work, but that, which I thought was really rich. And then also the Cannibal Capitalism one, which is more for a general audience as well. But when I read the two books, I was reading just to enjoy it, just to take in. I wasn't reading it with like a critical eye, like, But anyway, sorry. All love to Nancy. Let's see here. On the race thing, Black and Empire. He's a good account to follow. I think it's a he. His stuff is good. No party gives a shit about the Black community until it's time to vote. Then we are damn near nonstop corporate news. Mainly libs trying to force us to guarantee our loyalty to Dems again, like we have for over half a century, and got nothing in return.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Of course, supporting the Republicans isn't going to help either.
No.
Right. And that's the sad thing, that the poor and working people of the country, regardless of background, they have nobody to support. There really isn't any kind of arms race to win their support because neither party is actually interested in giving them anything. And for the most part, they're just screwed regardless of what happens. So it's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also what's his name? Oh crap. Adolf Reed Jr. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also his son and other people. But Adolf Reed, I remember had this line like, everything's changed about black politics except for the way it's talked about. And I think that what he was talking about was not so much what I think he would agree with what that person tweeted, but as I understand, it was the idea that a lot of the people who want to have focus on quote unquote the black community or black politics seem to, from his point of view, act like nothing's changed. So we have the new Jim Crow. It's like we have the dynamic, like basically the political economy. I think his problem is that a lot of this stuff, the liberal, which is identity politics, is totally bereft of political economy or the economy.
Yeah.
And so people are acting like we're still, that most African Americans it's still like it was before, civil rights and and whatnot. Not that there aren't. I don't want to say not that there's racial harmony.
It's the back in chains kind of argument that you've got to vote for the Democrats or the Republicans will put you back in chains. That argument has been trotted out in various forms over and over and over again for 50, 60 years.
Mm-hmm. And so let's see. So before we go on to the communism thing, it's a battle between fascism on one side of the ballot and communism on the other. Woohoo! Not neoliberalism, not more neoliberalism. No, we got big things coming up. Big decision to make, people. 2024.
Oh, yeah. So important.
So Megyn Kelly,
so much.
Yeah, Megyn Kelly's been she's so here's her issue. She was having a back and forth with someone from the Kamala Harris campaign, I think. Back and forth, and she did, to be fair, she did kind of hand him his lunch, but I don't even know if it matters. So her point is, one, Joe Biden was mentally unfit for months, years, and Kamala and the Democrats and the media lied to us all. Yeah, because I didn't know it. And anyway, so fine. This is Megan's words. 2, those Olympic boxers are male and went through male puberty. 3, Tim Walz signed a law requiring tampons in all grade 4 through 12 school bathrooms and made a point of including the boys' bathroom. 4, Walz knew, I think she's talking about dishonesty, must be about lies here. 4, Walz knew his National Guard unit was going to Iraq and quit anyway. He knew the deployment was coming at least as of February the 5th, one vet says fall 04, and didn't retire until May 5th. Some men in the unit felt abandoned. Walz has repeatedly used a title he didn't earn, retired commander, sergeant major, said he was in war, and let others say that he served in Operation Enduring Freedom when he didn't. When it was brought to his attention years ago by upset vets, he changed nothing. Okay. I just want to say that people who don't know this, Megyn Kelly is a lawyer. And so she's really good at when there's that phrase that when the law isn't on your side, argue the facts, and when the facts aren't on your side, argue the law. And when neither, then I don't know what you do. You have to come up with a good story. But anyway,
Megyn Kelly
she's upset. She's upset about the lies.
An old establishment Republican who used to be on Fox, right?
Yeah.
And then became a liberal darling for getting into it with Trump, and then got pushed off of the liberal network because she wasn't drawing enough eyeballs. And then now she's trying to get back in with the right, and she's doing it with a bunch of establishment Republican lines that aren't going to even be effective in helping the Republican candidate. So it's just a career that has careened from one disaster to another.
Although she's doing pretty good, I think. Fine. I'm just looking down because I'm trying to where's my communist stuff, and I finally found it. I thought, did I just hallucinate? putting those together. Okay. Let's see. So we have this. Yes. Let me look at the time. Okay. But there is an actual policy position. Prepare yourself, Benjamin. A policy position or the beginnings of one have been released. I don't know if this is a something that went online on their website, or if she mentioned this in some stump speech.
It's not on the website yet. Last time I checked.
Okay, so Selena Wang, I don't know who she is, but she has Selena Wang TV. So there's this housing plan that's also, it's one of the reasons why she's being called a communist, which is hilarious. Not that they need a reason. More on Harris housing plan: a call for construction of 3 million new housing units, tax incentive call for
begging private money to construct homes, begging rich people to do it. That's what it means.
Yes. Benjamin, you'll get your chance to vent, my friend. So tax incentive for building starter homes, lower rent by taking on corporate and major landlords, stopping Wall Street investors from buying up and marking up homes in bulk. Ooh, she's taking on the BlackRock. Okay. Which
is actually a much smaller percentage of the total housing stock than anybody realizes. It's not nearly as big a problem as people have framed it to be online. But most of the stuff that this will of course happen because people will say she doesn't have any policies, and eventually they'll say that loud enough and long enough that she'll have to come out with policies. What will she come out with? Well, it'll be stuff that the Biden administration already talked about or announced, like the rent control stuff. That was stuff Biden was already out talking about weeks ago, actually, but nobody paid attention to it because it was Biden talking about it and he was already no longer the candidate. But this was in a certain amount of the financial press a few weeks back. Right. So it'll be stuff that the Biden administration was already talking about. She's also going to do, and this is something every Democratic nominee does. They go raid the Obama platform from 2008 for all the stuff Obama never did. And they say they're going to do all that stuff. And their level of seriousness about it is exactly as high as Obama's own level of seriousness.
If the voters don't make a mistake, if the voters don't make a mistake and everybody's a Democrat and the parliamentarian doesn't cause us problems, then maybe we might get, I don't know, a minimum wage or something like that.
Yeah. If not for Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, they would have done all of it. They really would have.
Well, remember the parliamentarian? That was my favorite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which has been in every platform since 2008, and it never goes anywhere. That is going to be one of the things that you'll hear lots of people say, oh, you've got to vote for Harris because she'll help the labor unions with the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. And they say it every time, and it never, ever, ever, ever,
women's right
ever
to
passes. Never passes. They're never going to do any of that stuff.
Yeah. But it was enough for, let's see, I think this was actually, Elon was on this. I think this might have been, I don't know. Anyway, so this is one meme. I just need to subsidize demand. Home prices go up. People get angry. Subsidize demand. Are you okay, bro? Yeah, I just need to subsidize demand. So
that's a very reductive account of liberal.
Yeah, I know, but this is what they're. Yeah. And then another one, Elon. Let's see. Oops. So autism capital. Memes really
he's
cut to
terrible
the truth.
at messaging. That guy.
Yeah, he is.
He really is very bad.
Elon or autism capital or both?
Elon, like
maybe they're the same
Twitter
person.
Space that he did with Trump was just unlistenable. It really was totally unlistenable, which is incredible because you have Donald Trump, who is someone who has been quite effective at getting people to pay attention to stuff over the years. Elon Musk is incredibly inarticulate. Just
he's
incredibly
boring.
Inarticulate.
I think he's
very
boring.
dull to listen to, which is amazing because of how famous he is. You'd think he would be more interesting. I've never been able to listen to that guy for any length of time.
I mean, it's like
he does this umming all the time when he talks. And I don't mean to make fun or pick on somebody, but I mean, he is a billionaire oligarch. And it just astounds me that he's managed to raise so much money over the years for so many projects when he talks like that. He has no presentation skills as far as I can tell.
Well, maybe when he was more scrappy, young and scrappy, and he had to, before there was so much belief in the brand.
before what? All of these federal outfits gave all of this money to him because he was pledging to build electric cars.
Well,
right?
yeah,
like, how did he get going?
Yeah.
He got going because he was pledging to do electric cars, and the Obama administration and so on, they wanted electric cars, so they supported what he was doing, and they gave him a bunch of government incentives and tax incentives.
Yeah. I mean,
he
I'm
completely
assuming
feasted off that stuff, and now he acts like he did it on his own.
Yeah,
like they all do.
Well, and also I think his dad had an emerald mine in South Africa, so whatever, family. But so no, I always thought it's like, obviously, just like when people want to say Trump is an idiot, it's like, okay, you can't manage to do what he's done without having, certain capacities. Now, I have no doubt that maybe, Elon is a cool inventor or whatever. But when I've listened,
I do have doubt about that. I have doubt about that because I've heard from people who have worked for SpaceX and who have talked to him and who have said it's like placating a child, that he doesn't know anything about engineering and is quite incompetent even on that side of things.
Okay, so maybe
I would doubt even that. Trump is someone who has certain skills. Trump is someone who has certain persuasive rhetorical skills. Musk is not that kind of guy. I don't really understand how Musk
what has he just been
made
good? Is he just like devious? So he's good at like getting other people's ideas and going with them or something? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. This is something that is an interesting puzzle for me. And at some point in my life, if I had way too much time and nothing better to do, I would want to get to the bottom of it, which is how did somebody as stupid and inarticulate as Elon Musk make that much money?
Yeah. No, I have and people want to. That's the thing, is that it'd be better if he didn't do all this stuff, because then he'd be able to come up with some sort of mystique. If he was just, tweeting every once in a while and coming out with like his 14th kid with some weird name and some ugly whatever it was.
A lot of what goes on, in Silicon Valley is that there's some kind of incentive program from the government, and these people find ways to game those incentive programs. And a lot of the big Silicon Valley companies begin with the government wants a business to do something. It makes a bunch of tax incentives, and somebody finds a way to pitch themselves to that paperwork. But a lot of it is filing paperwork in such a way that you seem like you really are capable of doing whatever it is that they want. A lot of these government contracts and these subsidies, they involve a lot of flim-flam on the part of the people trying to acquire them, because they have to act like they can do a bunch of things that oftentimes they don't necessarily have the capacity to do at the point at which they promise it, and then they have to construct it, flying by the seat of their pants. And a lot of these, defense companies lose huge amounts of money promising that they can do things and then under delivering or taking forever to do them. And a lot of the contracts themselves and the stuff that the feds put out, a lot of it is poorly written in the first place, difficult to interpret or make sense of. So they have to hire piles and piles of engineers just to make sense of the language and figure out what it means. And it's almost like you're in a kind of theological setting where they're going, how can, we have to justify what we do to the defense contract, to the to the state, to the Dodd, to Dodd. And so we have to put what we're doing in a language such that they will accept that we're following the terms of the contract. And all of this stuff, it's like a theological, weird, kind of almost, a bad stereotype of the Middle Ages, the way in which it's all bureaucratically finagled. And it doesn't require a lot of creativity on the part of a lot of these people. It's more about, do you understand paperwork? Do you understand administrative thinking? Like taking a standardized test, right? If you're taking the SAT or the GRE in the United States, it's really a test of, can you understand how the people who wrote the question want you to think, and can you do something which fits into that logic? It's about picking up on a certain kind of administrative bureaucratic logic and finding a way to feed into it, which is exactly what someone who goes to college typically needs to be able to do in this country. So it's very good at sorting out who has good potential for going to an American university, because that is the principal skill that most college graduates have and that they need to have. But it has very little to do with being articulate, charismatic, or intelligent.
Yeah. Well, and I would say is that, not to get to have even more sparkle go off the diamond, but I don't know if you've been involved in applying for research funding. I have. And I remember the PhD I did was part of a larger project, and so there was 4 universities involved in 3 different countries, and I think I was one of like 6 PhDs or something. And I learned really quick that and it took me a while because I realized I was taking it all too seriously. The funded research program, because I kept on thinking like, here's how because they had to envision like what they thought the different projects would be. And then they go and hire the PhDs and the postdocs, and there's the senior people. And then you start realizing that they present as a fact like everyone's working together. It's very interactive and interchangeable, even though you have social scientists and the ITC people and all this stuff. But somehow we're all going to agree what we mean on these terms. It's all going to be fine. And there was a few of us who were really getting panicked, like, the way I'm using this concept and the way they're using this concept, with this person's using the concept, it's supposed to somehow come together. We're not doing that at all. And finally we realized that it didn't matter. Totally didn't matter. It was like, fine, you just do your own thing. I mean, you have to give, but then once a year, there was this panic when we had to all get together and figure out how, because there was going to be someone from the funding agency that we had to give some presentation to make it look, but it was all about, because they also weren't in our field. So they were coming at it from the institutional side, from the NVO, which was the National Organization of Science Funding in Holland at the time. And so you just basically have to figure out how you're going to present what they need to present, what they want to hear. That's going to be the least amount of work for them. And you check all these boxes. You have these fantastic NAT charts and all this stuff. And everything looks like everything's a well-oiled machine. But really, you have just an umbrella for 12 people doing 12 different projects that just kind of are funded from the same thing.
Yeah. And when you just have to find a way to bullshit them.
Yeah.
That's what ultimately happens.
And it was so hilarious. And I remember we were pissed, and actually made two great friends out of it when we realized, like, why didn't our supervisors, the senior people, let us in on the fact that this was all bullshit? That it was just like, and I remember thinking we could, because we're actually like trying to like figure out, like, if we're all going to be like, and we're being way too serious, like, well, we need to, figure out how is this going to work when you're using this
One
theory.
One of the biggest struggles that first generation PhDs have,
it was crazy,
is that a lot of the time you're not actually supposed to use your degree or your brain or the skills that you've acquired. And nobody tells you that you're not actually supposed to use those skills.
Oh yeah. You have to figure that out on your own. You're like, well, God, I could have saved so much time. And they're like, why am I? And then
you're only supposed to use those skills when you're writing very specific kinds of things. And the rest of the time you're expected to turn your brain off and act like somebody who has never thought about concepts in that kind of way at that kind of level. It's incredible how they do that.
Well, then I knew that all that, like the transdisciplinary, the interdisciplinary, I was all just bull. It's just like whatever. And I was like, okay. And so then I was like, that's great. I wish you told us this like a year and a half ago, because we're like literally like we're taking it seriously. These things are supposed to fit in together, and we're having these like really philosophical discussions.
Degenerates, right? This is how it degenerates into just administrative bullshit, right? And then it's rationalized as if it's still great intellectual activity, but how can it be when it has to be crushed into this administrative box made by people who don't understand any of the debates or any of the disciplines involved?
Well, and also I did manage to get a Marie Curie grant. That's how I ended up doing my postdoc research at Oxford way back when. But it was so funny. The first time I applied to it, I was waitlisted. And then that was really disappointing. And then I thought, okay, but then this is the other thing, you can do it over and over again. And there's the whole apparatus about helping you know how to tell the funders what they want to hear. Yeah. And you can so most of my time wasn't spent on the actual the theory and the research proposal of it. It was about how can I say the things that I need to say and the way I need to say them for them to want to fund this. So for example, one of the weaknesses was because I wanted to go and I was going to look at the transition from, making real estate markets in the peri-urban areas of Mumbai. Yeah. And I had to say that without it sounding too Marxist or too this. I also had to say why the government, both in the Holland and the UK and India, could be interested in this, as well as the market. Like one of the critiques was I didn't spell out how I would reach out or what my research would be for the private sector. And so then I had to make up all this stuff. Like, I'm going to reach out to the city of London and to these things because, of course, there's a lot of interest in investing in real estate in BRICS countries, and it'd be really interesting for them to.
They compel you to lie.
And I was never going to do it.
Right,
but
of
I had
course.
to
They
take
compel
this
you to
time
lie.
to do it. And also I'm sorry, I'll cut this out maybe, but it was so disgusting to me because it was all about this excellence. And they would in the sense, like, you have to talk about your past excellence and your current excellence and your capacity to be a future excellent, blah, blah, blah. It was all this, like, I'm like, who talks this way?
No, it's like going before some kind of committee in the GDR.
Yeah. But you have to do it this way. Yeah, you have to do it this way because the people, even though they're academics who are going to be also doing this, they get the checklists and they have to be able to say, okay, her past excellence. And
as some bureaucrat,
like, how the fuck do I know about excellent?
They don't know anything about any of it. They know nothing about any of it, and they just make up a list and they decide what the words mean. And it's like trying to argue with agents in the Stasi or something who just have a kind of bureaucratic mentality of tick boxing and what fits into what.
Yeah.
And,
so literally
dogmatic categories and all sorts of bullshit.
of the Marie Curie thing, about maybe 25%, I think. Maybe 30 at best of all the stuff you have to do has to do with the work itself and what you actually want to do.
Because really the function of all this administrative stuff is to suck all of our energy away so that we don't actually have any time to think and put us in a situation where we think that we are being academics and intellectuals by engaging in all of this administrative crap, the real function of which is to make us stupid, to deaden us and rob us of our energy so that we can't actually do what it is that academics and intellectuals are meant to do, which is to think critically about the system and what needs to be done with it.
No, and it was so funny because, and then at the end, when you have to you do have to go through this bit of this exercise about what, like what you thought you were going to do, what you did. And I just, with all the stuff about reaching out to, the state actors like ODID and, whatever at the Indian side or the Dutch side or the UK side, particularly the financial sector, I just be like, oh, I reached out, I emailed, I just went on, I shouldn't say this. I went on the website and found some names, said, oh, I reached out to them. I tried to schedule a workshop or whatever, but it didn't work out. So I'll probably I'll definitely send them a link to my work. And if they want to get together, and it's like, okay. Just
whatever. People just they're reduced to lying and just bullshitting. And it's something that begins in high school, right? Honor students in high school begin by faking their way through assignments to appease a teacher who, in many cases, unfortunately, is a bureaucrat who is easy to deceive. And this kind of behavior gets going very early when people are teenagers, and it continues throughout their entire lives because the system doesn't reward integrity. It doesn't reward being honest. It doesn't reward thinking seriously. It just rewards this kind of gobbledygook, which is why they can't tell the difference between a large language model and actual intelligence.
No, it was so hilarious because, and also I noticed that when there's this whole system around helping people get this money, of course. And of course, not like I said, hardly any of it's actually about the work itself. But another concern they have is that the cutoff point keeps on increasing of these scores. And I'm like, well, of course, because people learn what the people want to say. And the larger institutes can have people that go to all these things to help people learn how to do this stuff. So of course they're gonna bump it up. So when a friend of mine who was awarded one of these, I think 4 years before I did, the cutoff point in geography, social science was I think 92.1, and the year I got it, it was 96.4. And somehow, and this is also how bullshit it is. Like, what could you? It's just so hilarious to me. But I was really I felt bad about it, but also like I managed to I managed to get a really, a heavily political economy Marxist without being Marxist in word, funded. And of course, I'm going to reach out to the banks who are interested in the real estate sector in BRICS countries. Of course.
This whole system
who I
needs
really
to go.
care about. That's my target audience.
Whole system needs to go.
Oh my God. Sorry. But it helped me. It's just nice when you can say it out loud, because people, you can say it, but it's like there's always the elephants in the room. And if you mention the elephants in the wrong, like in a formal situation, even semi-formal one, you get in big trouble. But like off to the side, or if you're like us or like me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm, the institutions don't want to support me anymore. Anyway, I'm too much. I can't pretend the elephant isn't in the room anymore. It's hilarious, but like off the record, like slowly, and even
personally,
a couple of
times, I don't want to be somewhere where I have to bullshit all the time.
Oh my God!
I'd rather just be dead than spend my life bullshitting all the time.
Well,
I really would rather be dead.
Yeah, and I get, I'm a bit animated if I'm, at a bar and I'm, had a drink some me. And so I remember a couple of times of people who I had, honest exchanges with. They'd be like, look, I'm with you, but we got to be careful, because if like letting me know, like, you don't want to get a reputation for like not being a game player. I was just like, and I was like,
this
my
is what
God.
I hated in high school.
I dreamed about being.
This is what I hated about high school. Is that
like, it's all bullshit.
Everything was bullshit. It was all not real intellectual stuff. High school was always just about appeasing people in authority. It was never actually about thinking. And this is what I hated about it. And I went to university. Every time you go to a new school, somebody says, you've now reached the level at which you will finally be able to do serious intellectual work, and you won't be constantly having to appease a bureaucrat. And unfortunately, it never changes. It never changes. The further up you go, it becomes more and more sophisticated, the ways in which they deceive you into thinking that appeasing a bureaucrat is real intellectual work. They get better and better at it, and they manage to convince lots of people who understood in high school that they were wasting their time in bullshitting. By the time they get to undergrad, or by the time they do their master's, or by the time they do their PhD, they suddenly think that the administrative work they're doing is real or serious work. It's just a huge parasitic time suck.
Oh my God. But just one last thing on this before we go on. I remember I was talking to some. I can't remember which city it was, but it was during my field work in India, and I might have been Kalyan Dombivli. It was some municipality, and I was talking with this woman who'd been like the head of the poverty cell for maybe, I don't know, 20 years or something, and getting to break the ice with people, right? And so I remember she said this one thing, because I was like, oh, what do you think about this new policy or whatever it was, and that, and she just kind of laughed a bit, and she said, the policies change, but the work doesn't. Which is basically was kind of thing, like, that. And what I thought about that is that at the time, that was when those of us as PhDs working on the project realized that we had wasted all this time trying to get on the same page conceptually and methodologically when it didn't matter. And then it was just kind of like, and I thought it was the same thing. It's like we have these terms or these trends, so like, transdisciplinary or interdisciplinarity or this intersection, all this stuff, like, and whatever. But it's like the actual bread and butter, does it change that much? But the way you have to go along with it and pretend. And I remember asking these, and another thing that was happening with these municipalities a lot is that somebody would get a contract at the state or the national level, and you go around, you'd see like these, computers and all this stuff there, and they'd be plastically covered under dust, and you'd realize that no one's really using them. Or the consultants would be setting up a GIS, but that only the consultants would be, no one, all this stuff that was on there. And then, but you realize that they were never asked about it, and they would never bring it up because they also didn't want to get in trouble. So there's all this pretending.
Yeah.
And of course, there's money going around. There's all this pretending that somehow this ICT revolution is going to somehow make everything fantastic at every village and municipal level. There's not going to be any corruption. There's not going to be any of this or any of that. And you actually go there and you're like, oh yeah, it's like it's in some room someplace.
No, it just existed to legitimate the hell out of all of that stuff. Of course, right?
And I was like, there's similarities here, though.
Right.
I'm like,
they
you're
just
right,
want you to
sister.
legitimate what they do, right?
Yeah.
That's really what they want us to do. They want us to legitimate whatever stupid bureaucratic nonsense they decide to do. And they want us to make sophisticated apologist arguments for it. And that's what they've wanted us to do for thousands of years at the end of the day.
No, and I was just like, that will always stick with me. She's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the work stays the same. It's like, but she figured it out, obviously.
It's a good dose of yes minister there, right?
Yeah.
You know,
oh, yeah.
She was. Humphrey.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was, she knew how the game was played at every scale level. It was kind of interesting. But anyway, yeah. So that's an interesting thing. The similarities between higher education in Ivy League schools and local municipal poverty cell municipal cells.
Yeah. And being a high school student. Anywhere.
Anyway, so yeah, here we go. So again,
oh yeah, I mentioned this.
Yeah, this is why again. So again, we've been told for a long time. It eased up a bit after the assassination attempt on Trump, but it's kind of coming up again that this is like, you know, a vote that you have to get involved because fascism and democracy are on the ballot. And now the Trump camp, or the people who are opposed to the Democrats, are now framing everything Kamala Harris does and says as communism.
Yeah, they go, you know what we didn't have enough of? People acting like the election has existential stakes for democracy. We didn't have enough of that. Let's go make up another alternative version of that so that the two versions of it can dominate the whole discussion. Yeah, both just completely politically ineffective, politically just dead ender stuff. And stuff that they tried in the Romney campaign, during the Obama administration, and it was never very effective. But these guys, you know, I'm sure a lot of this is just, you know, what is the kind of thing that my boss or the people that I work for will accept? Well, what's the stuff that has been done that has already been accepted as good work, and just coughing up and vomiting up the same old tired crap.
Yeah. So for people who aren't watching but are listening, we have on one side it says forward, and if you remember the it was a poster, wasn't it? Or maybe it was a painting. The artwork,
it was a poster.
Poster, yeah. That's the Hope poster for the Obama campaign. The same artist isn't mentioned here, did one for Kamala Harris, and it says forward. So it's the same kind of aesthetic, but it says forward. And she has a bit of a red lip, and she has no wrinkles. And her race is also undefined, but it's kind of a light blue. She's a light blue.
Reminds me of the Andrew Yang slogan: "Not left, not right, forward."
Yeah.
Beyond ideology, has no content, just going where we're going, wherever that is.
And I was like, forward into the abyss. What's happening?
And on the other side, something my grandmother used to say, which is that she was always bothered by the word progressive. You know, progressing towards what exactly?
Yeah, I need more.
Nobody ever gives you an answer.
No, just keep on going. And then someone has already put. They have on the right. You have Kammunism, which doesn't really, I don't know why they have to change it. Anyway, Kammunism. Someone's made, anyway. So it's like it's communism, but with a Ka. And then they've added the hammer and sickle from the defunct Soviet Union, and a Che. I think that's a Che beret.
Yeah,
because nothing screams Che Rivera.
This is the
full and revolution like Kamala Harris.
These people, they used to be the frickin' Groyper meme magic 2016 Trump people. This is all they can do now. This is what they're reduced to. It's like somebody put out a picture of Shaquille O'Neal, the NBA. Former NBA player, 7 feet tall, huge, giant guy, right? Well, somebody said, the Trump campaign in 2024, and it's him in a Boston Celtics jersey, the final year of his career, as his body was completely failing and he had gained a ton of weight.
Yeah.
And it's like, yep, that is what the Trump return to Twitter is. It's a totally washed, completely ineffective, still vaguely reminding you of itself.
Do you think it's because he's listening to the wrong people, or he's just tired, or maybe he's post-traumatic stress from the shooting?
He has always been terrible at picking people. He has never been good at hiring people. It is the thing that none of these people on the right want to talk about in relation to him. He's never been able to hire people that are good at anything in particular. His administration was completely full of incompetent people, useless people, people who infought about stupid things. And people really should, if they want to understand this movement, go back and read some of the books that came out during the Trump administration about the internal conflicts and drama of that administration. Because the overwhelming thing that comes out of it is that it's court politics. It's whoever is in favor with him at the moment. They get what they want, but he can change his mind about stuff day to day. You know, you flatter him, you're the last person he talks to in the day. He's much more likely to listen to you if you just happen to be the most recent person he's heard from. And that he is totally changeable. His mood's changeable. People are trying to hide information from him or put objects in front of him to try to get him to notice things or react to things. It's completely nuts, the stuff that went on inside that administration. It's a bunch of squirrels fighting over a nut. It's some of the stupidest crap that you'll ever read about. And these people are like, oh, he's going to, fight the deep state.
He knows it now. He's learned his lesson.
Services. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's learned so much because elderly septuagenarians, they learn a lot. They're really good at assimilating.
There's no way he would let a Mike Pompeo or what's his John Bolton in. No, but I was thinking like it was really almost like, is he tired or what? Because I was thinking I really thought I'd at least be, and I thought I knew I would think I wouldn't take it seriously, but I thought that the attack ads would be funny. I was just kind of like, really?
Even in 2016, he had to fire his campaign people multiple times and change them out because the messaging got so offbeat multiple times in 2016 itself. He went through, I think, 3 different campaign chairs over the course of that race. It's just incredible the amount of turnover that went on within that administration. He had people like Scaramucci. Him. Everybody just memory holes that.
But remember, what's interesting is that worked out for him because he kind of like, it was embarrassing, but he turned into lemonade. And that guy, the lawyer, Cohen, who now is like an MSNBC regular.
Yeah, a lot of them have managed to parlay it into
kind
careers.
Of some sort of, I don't know.
Yes, because if you're a Trump person who's willing to stab that administration in the front stabbing, which is what Scaramucci claimed he was. I'm not a backstabber, I'm a front stabber, he said. If you front stab the administration, they'll give you a nice job and put you on TV. And they loved all of the leakers. The administration, people forget this. What I love is how full of leaks, completely full of leaks.
Yeah. And what I think is interesting is I know that like even when I can, not that I'm against redemption or second or third chances or whatever. So, but I remember when people were going crazy about when Helen was having a hot dog with George W. Bush or something, and he became like a painter, and now he's or whatever. People are like, are we forgetting like?
Oh, it's incredible. His favorability numbers with Democrats is almost 50% now.
People are talking when I look at it when I'm watching MSNBC less than it's just like you get to a point where you just have to take a break. So I try to watch a bit of Fox. I try to watch a bit of MSNBC. I try to watch a bit of BBC, and also the crazy thing with Douglas Murray. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Just to be like, to have an idea of what those different things are trying to, or actually 2 sides of one thing, want people to, are trying to get us to think or understand things to be. And I'm like, Michael Cohen is like, he's like a virtue now. Like he's a moral figure.
Yeah. I do not watch television news, and I rationalize it on the grounds that the median television news viewer is now 70 years old and will soon be dead. That it's a constituency that basically it's people who have had the same views for the last 20 years. Aren't going to change.
But
are at an age where they're not going to change or move.
It's like, okay.
So nothing ever changes in the world of TV because it's the same stuff, the same messaging that they've been doing for 20 years for a population that is 70 years old or older in most cases, isn't going to change its politics, has been set in its ways for 20 years at least. So you don't really have to watch TV news, in my opinion, because it's always the same thing, because it's for a dwindling constituency of increasingly quite elderly people who have thought the same thing for a good 2 decades.
But they do have people like the correspondents are also like, they'll have a Times article. They write for the Times sometimes. They work for the Washington Post.
Yeah, nobody is reading any of that either.
Or they used to be like, and also like a lot of people like former like security state people.
Yeah, but it's mainly elderly people who are reading
Eddie Glaude.
and
Do you know who
buying
Eddie
that
Glaude
stuff.
is? Do you know who Eddie Glaude is?
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, no, he's a professor of something. He's African American, and he always has this kind of look like, and he always seems like he's very in shock about how bad things are. He's kind of like I don't know, like and he also, I think he's on the Morning Joe thing a lot, and also with Al Sharpton. But Eddie Glaude is a professor of something. I think he might be a professor at Princeton, and he's probably in his 50s or something. He reminds me of kind of like a more buttoned up Cornell West, maybe.
Honestly, I actively don't care at this point about what goes on television. Like, that's where I'm at. And that not as a criticism.
Well, what about the New York Post? Because New York Post has communism. They have to come up with a better thing because it doesn't read well. How would you say that phonetically? Kamala, okay, communism. That's better. I mean the hard A. Communism. Harris unveils a budget breaking, and they're really thinking through this here. The metaphor. They want to make sure you get it. Of the communism, and also the hammer and sickle from the defunct. It was in 89, yeah, when the Soviet Union ended. Was it 89 or was it 91?
Technically 91.
Yeah, so getting a bit there, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Hammer and sickle. Harris unveils budget-breaking 1.7 trillion economic plan that includes government price controls. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah,
that's how it starts with the price controls.
Tired stuff. Same old thing.
Let's see. But here's something interesting from Sabi Sabs. She is I guess a left podcaster. Kamala's campaign is partnering with 2 BlackRock alums for her economic policy plan, but sure, push her to the left.
I mean, imagine even needing that fact. Like, imagine that's the fact that persuades you or convinces you. Imagine.
Well, it's also go ahead.
Being open enough to the idea still at this stage after the 2019 debacle that she is somebody who has any convictions at all. I don't know how anybody could believe that Harris has any convictions at all after 2019. Any at all.
Yeah.
About anything in any direction.
Well, she's not going to come up with her own policy.
The only thing I think she might be committed to is that she is pro-cop because she chose to be a prosecutor. Yeah. And I don't think you do that in your life unless you sympathize with the police.
Yeah. But I would say that it's interesting because much like the woke and anti-woke need each other because they need something to comment on. You have the push to the left, can't be pushed to the left, that go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I guess, the DSA types that think they can still be pushed to the left, and the DSA. And then you have but also just like you have the squad or the idea that you can reform or revolutionize the Democratic Party. You have the same thing that happens inside the DSA, where you have these splinter units that think they're going to make the DSA more interested in class and less interested in politics.
Yeah, which
and they go back and forth about how it's possible
matters, right? Because the fundamental fantasy is that the DSA is politically important because it's the largest socialist organization in the country. It's politically important, and therefore, if you can reform the DSA, but at this point, we are so many levels removed from actually doing anything. We're not only talking about entryism into the Democratic Party, we're now talking about entryism into the DSA, an organization which has no influence within either party. And people are spending their lives trying to do entryism into an organization which itself has no power within the 2 parties that actually govern the country.
Yeah.
And people are wasting their lives trying to do this. It's astounding to me that people would waste. You only have one body that is constantly in the process of dying, and you're going to spend your life trying to penetrate the DSA.
Yeah, there's only so many, not everybody's going to get a job managing the nation. There's only so many stepping stones.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. I mean, but do something with your life. Something interesting, and worth doing and valuable. Who wants to spend their finite time on planet Earth trying to convince people in the DSA to get serious? Who wants to do that?
Well, some people apparently. I don't know.
Yeah, come on, guys. Do something better. Do something better with your lives. Really, we're all going to be dead.
Yeah, I know. I think about that too. I have to start thinking about my life in terms of literally time. We should do that more. Some people do. I'm like thinking like every once in a while, I'm like, how many minutes do I have and how much am I going to do?
People really undervalue their time.
Yeah.
Everybody really does. It's why people consent to wage labor in the first place. It's because we all undervalue our time.
Yeah. Walter Kernaghan, he's the guy who's does well, he's been around longer than Matt Taibbi, but that's where I know him from. And he floated this. Maybe he's trying to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. Is it possible that Trump is biding his time while his opponent, her party, and the media solemnize their commitment to one another such that there's no chance of turning back? Ooh, 40 chess. You think that's possible, or is it just that it's
no, I think that's cope.
Yeah.
I think he's coping.
Yeah. Because he's probably thinking like he's probably watching them miss all these opportunities and doing all the crap, and obviously he doesn't have. Or
because
maybe
some of these people have rationalized the whole thing on the grounds that they think they've convinced themselves that Trump is really brilliant or really capable or something, and they've failed to internalize that actually his continuous failure to hire anybody competent is just the truth of him. That just is what he is. He is not someone who thinks rigorously enough about all of these things in such a way that he's able to hire people who are able to accomplish anything.
Yeah, like any day now. So the post-millennial, I don't know who this is, but I thought this was interesting. This was making the rounds. Harris supporters at UNLV rally explain why they're supporting the VP for president. I'm a trans man and I'm gay and I've had an abortion before and I don't want to lose that. Well, at least there are material reasons, but they love this stuff. So the idea that, this is the youth cohort for the Harris.
Well, and this is what the right will do, right? The right will go and try to find whoever it is who feeds into their social issue rhetoric, because they don't talk about anything material. They don't talk about anything that actually matters to anybody. Trump in 2016 talked about trade, and people cared about that. He doesn't talk about that anymore. He's buddied up with the tech oligarchs, who are, of course, committed to a broadly status quo approach. And so, of course, all they have is tired old lines from 2012. That's all they've got.
Oh, let's see this. I don't know. I thought, I don't know if you know who Theo Vaughn is. He's a comedian. He also has a podcast. He's a funny dude. Anyway, I watch Tim Dillon more because Tim Dillon's more not suitable for work, but Theo Vaughn, he's more, I don't know, kind of, anyway, I bring up him because Bernie Sanders went on his show the other day, and now this has been making some, I think I saw Jimmy Dore was irritated about it. So Bernie Sanders on how the Democratic establishment took him out of the presidential race. So here's a quote from Bernie Sanders when he's on the Theo Vaughn show sometime this week. Quote from Bernie: "That's what happens when you take on the establishments. What happened is we won the first 3 primaries, and then the establishment got very, very nervous. And they said, hey, it would be a good idea if you dropped out. So if you're asking me, are we a democracy? In one sense, we are. I use the term oligarchy. An oligarchy is a society where a small number of very wealthy people control the economic and political life of the country. I think we are rapidly in that direction." Quote, end of quote from Bernie.
Well, that's, several years too late.
Yeah. I think he's always,
kind of difference.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's kind of like this. I don't know if you ever saw, well, you don't watch much, do you? But Dave Chappelle did a Saturday Night Live thing. I think it was after Biden won, or I can't remember. But anyway, he called, and I thought it was really good. His take on Trump and Trump voters, I think, is quite funny and but poignant. And he called Trump an honest liar. It's like when Trump would come out and say, like, basically say what people are doing, like what's going on in there. Not because he wanted to change it or could do anything about it, but he just let you know and then go back in and keep on doing the same bullshit. And I was thinking the same thing about Bernie. It's like he didn't just figure this out. And not only does he know this, but he continues to be the good Democrat. He falls in line like nobody's business. But yet he'll go out and say this. I mean,
and
it's
clearly he knew this at the time and could have said it at the time, but chose not to. One of the theories that I think is relevant is that he seems to have a personal relationship with Biden, a personal friendship with him, that caused him to be softer on him in 2020 than he was on Hillary in 2016. And I also think we saw that reflected in the fact that Bernie was a Biden diehard. Bernie was somebody who stayed on the Biden bus until the very end. He was more loyal to Biden than any of these Obama administration people, which, was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. What interesting stuff. Oh, I want to get.
I've also seen conspiracy theories alleging that, at one point in I think it was 2016, he had a black eye because somebody from the Democratic Party hit him.
Okay, I don't want to get
people argue that he
yeah
was assaulted or physically intimidated.
Oh dear. Okay, well, I want to get to this because there are two other big figures or images. I don't know what we would call them. Archetypes. A foreign and involved in the U.S. presidential election, and one, of course, is the Night King, Vladimir Putin. And I picked here "Winter is Coming" because I was thinking, reason why I picked the Night King for Putin is two. One is I thought, okay, we're being asked to believe by both pretty much most people on the Republicans or the Democrats that, it's an existential threat. And if Putin isn't defeated in Ukraine, then, in 2 years, we'll all be speaking Russian. I don't know. And then Benjamin reminded me kindly that Russia is cold. And I thought that's it. Vladimir Putin is that. So I just want to ask you what you make of this figure that both the Republican and Trump campaign, Republican Party more broadly, and the Harris-Walz campaign and the Democratic Party more broadly, what they're making, what they're asking us to believe about Putin and the Russian threat, and how it relates to U.S. politics or the lack thereof.
What I would say is that there are Ukrainian troops right now in Russian territory, and they're in Russian territory on the basis of weapons they've been given that are well downstream from our best weapons. And that cost, in terms of a percentage of the defense budget, a very, very small amount. The actual cost of Ukraine aid, if you compare it to, say, the cost of the Iraq War, is very, very low for the United States. It is incredible just how easy it has been for the Biden administration to cause the Russian army trouble with very, very small amounts of money. And that's why the Biden administration, whenever they talk about this, they start framing this as one of their great achievements, which sounds very out of touch and horrible when you consider that this is a war that is killing lots of people. But they're incredibly pleased with themselves because for them, it was a pleasant surprise to discover that they could completely stymie the Russian army with this small amount of money. And all they have to do is throw, $60 billion once a year or so at the Ukrainians, and that's enough to completely halt the Russian army and lock it in place in a never-ending forever war that bleeds it continuously of resources. It's incredible that that as it turns out, it can be done that cheaply. Really incredible. And so, but it's also absolutely terrible because it means that there's a continuous war fought on Ukrainian territory at the cost of Ukrainian lives. There's a continuous war fought now even on Russian territory, with huge numbers of Russian young men having their lives ruined by having to participate in this. It's an incredibly horrible, awful thing. But the Biden administration regards it as an achievement because as far as they're concerned, if you can keep the Russian army in a forever war in Ukraine, you've done some kind of wonderful thing. It's just awful. Awful. And now, of course, it has made the European Union more dependent on liquefied natural gas from North America. It's been, in a narrow kind of realpolitik sense, a big win for the United States, but it has come at such a horrific human cost. And of course, there is also the long-term issue of pushing the Russians toward the Chinese, encouraging Russian-Chinese cooperation. But really, I mean, it reveals the degree to which Russia is just not the kind of state that the Soviet Union was in any way, shape, or form. It's nowhere near of that magnitude as a power.
Well, then what would you make of, because Judge Napolitano has a really, I think, really good, which surprises me, but you end up watching, was it Judging Freedom? But he has regularly every week, he has Jeffrey Sachs, Scott Ritter, Colonel Wilkerson, Pepe Escobar, Max Blumenthal, Nanya Parapil, also some other people. The guy retired, a couple people from Britain as well. I can't remember. Alistair Cook, I think. And also anyway, so he has, when he talks about his foreign policy panel, and they have collectively, well, not though, I guess those who focus on who talk about Russia have a different take than you. They agree with everything except for the fact that Russia's been stymied. They would, from what I gather, and I have no way of confirming or denying because I don't know the facts on the ground, saying that that Russia has been holding back. They don't want to go hog out, like they don't want to pull a Netanyahu and an Israel in that part of in the Ukraine, and they've been holding out hope, maybe ridiculously, that there'll be that they'll push the Americans into agreeing that Ukraine should remain neutral and not enter NATO. And so the idea that actually, not to dispel the fact that the casualties have been large on both sides, but that actually the war has been contributed to the industrial development of Russia.
That's cope. Those people are coping and seething.
Yeah. No, because like I said, I don't have facts on the ground, so I don't know. But I would say they want to be like, they keep on saying that that Russia is going to have enough, and then they're going to not be restrained, and then we're going to end up in some sort of,
for one, they ought to know militarized Keynesianism is not at all a good long-term economic strategy for any country, and all of them ought to know that. Yeah. And for two, and it's not a good strategy for the people of that country to become dependent on making munitions for their income is not at all a good strategy for them long-term. And for two, it's this idea that the Russians are holding back or something, they're holding back in terms of using nuclear weapons. And they could use nuclear weapons.
Well, but I mean, they could bomb. They could bomb parts of Ukraine. They could. I mean, I'm just saying that theoretically, there's things they could be doing that they haven't done. Why they're not doing them, I don't know. So
because they haven't been able to establish air superiority over the country. They're not able to win a straightforward fight for the skies over it. Even you have to establish air superiority if you want to be able to bomb a country. And if you don't establish air superiority, you're going to constantly lose extremely expensive jets and bombers trying to do that, which is stupid because those bombers are extraordinarily expensive. So yes, there's certain stuff that the Russians aren't using because they don't feel that it's safe or would be productive or effective to use it from a military standpoint. But a lot of this stuff is people who are reading a certain amount of Russian state media, which involves a lot of rationalizing the situation. But fundamentally, a lot of this comes down to intelligence and stuff that we don't fully understand or fully know. Like, for instance, why is it that the Ukrainians have troops in Russian territory? What's the purpose of that? What strategic purpose or function does that serve? Why would they even decide to go there in the first place? The reporting that we have about their decision to go in there never really makes it clear why they're there. What is the reason?
Oh, sorry.
What is the reason that somebody has decided that Ukrainian troops should be there? We don't really know. And we probably won't find out for decades until stuff like that is declassified. And yes, in decades, we'll all have a clearer picture. And so on some of these different points where there's currently differences of view about exactly what is the balance of forces, this stuff will be clearer as stuff is declassive, but that will happen.
Well, I think
from now.
In terms of soldiers, in terms of how many Ukrainians you can have versus just quantitatively versus how many Russians you have, of course that's You can't do much about
but come
that.
on, you know, armies, modern warfare is not about how many infantry you have. That
but when you have but Benjamin, when you have a stalemate, when you have them getting a bit of ground, losing a bit of ground, getting a bit of ground, I mean, you have lots of casualties in this war because it's a ground war, as much as, if not more, than an air war. Or else you wouldn't have the casualties that you have on both sides.
Yes, and so what you have is tank columns getting completely obliterated by anti-tank guns that are extremely cheap for the West to manufacture and arm the Ukrainians with. The Russians trying these old, tank blitz strategies, which is the same stuff the Soviet army always was trying, and all of these proxy wars that were fought in the Cold War. You go back to the Arab-Israeli wars. It's always a bunch of the Arab armies are always fielding a bunch of Soviet tanks, and they're trying Soviet tank tactics. And what happens? Well, the more contemporary armies of the West have very cheap ways of defeating tanks that they've gotten very good at. The Soviet and Russian tanks have a variety of weaknesses that are well known, and it's not that expensive to put these tank columns down. And that's what happened initially. They came with a bunch of tank columns doing the big stupid thing that they always do with a bunch of tank columns. and because there was an enormous amount of Western weaponry already there, more than I anticipated. I thought at the beginning that the Russians would be successful because I thought that it would be more than anybody could deal with because of the sheer size of the army. The thing is, we had already by that point armed the Ukrainians with an enormous amount of anti-tank weaponry. And they were already able to stop tank columns. And this is something that just people don't properly engage with. How is this actually being fought? What weapons are actually being given to the Ukrainians? What are they actually doing with them? Instead, we get these kind of appeals to, and I was guilty of this at the beginning of the conflict, going, well, the Russian army is just big, right? It's just so huge. How could it possibly be stopped for any length of time, right? But this ignores, there have been many, many cases historically where very large states have tried to fight small states, and the small states are getting weapons from foreign states that are very powerful and have great industrial capacity. And the small state is able to put up a very, very long, lengthy, protracted fight. And eventually the big state is forced to give up or is forced to accept some kind of compromise resolution. It's a similar kind of case to when the Soviet Union invaded Finland back in the day. This stuff does happen, and more often than anybody would like to fully acknowledge, because once you acknowledge this, then you have to acknowledge that it's not as obvious how a war will go as people would like to think. People would like to think that you can just count the units at the start of the conflict and that will tell you what will happen. But one of the things about warfare that is really upsetting is that it is not something that you can just administratively code out. That's why wars are fought. Wars are fought because people gamble on their ability to win the fight. And they go, I think maybe I can do better than it says I can do on paper.
No, okay. So I want to, before we move on to this really interesting graphic, picture, I want to ask, so I understand that it's good for the quote unquote military industrial complex to keep these things going.
That's not the main reason. The main
no,
reason
but
is
hold on. I'm going to get to that. So, but why is it that? So, what do you think the real reason is, to the extent that there is a unifying one, about keeping this going, about really acting like they would put Ukraine into NATO? Why antagonize Russia like this? They want to balkanize it. They just really think that it's going to go back to the Soviet Union. What's their hard on for Vladimir Putin, in particular regards to Ukraine?
Well, ultimately, they don't think that it's possible to include Russia in European institutions and in NATO. They don't think that that can be done. Maybe it's too large a market to be included and to be, because when you include a state, there's a large movement of population as migrant workers move from that state, or there has to be a large amount of investment that moves into the state that you're incorporating into the zone. These small states, you can incorporate them 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. You get an influx of cheap labor from the Eastern European state when you let them in. And then there's investment opportunities as the money moves the opposite direction. And eventually the flow of migrants slows down as the standard of living improves in the Eastern European state. That's how it went with Poland. That's how it went with Hungary, right? Initially, there's an influx of cheap labor, and then the money gradually moves the other way, and the living standard comes up. But you can only do that in so many states at any given time. The pace at which you can do that is limited. Russia is a very large state with a very large population. So to add that state to the zone all at once would not work. If you wanted to add it to the zone, you would have to balkanize it and cut it up into smaller states that could be added slowly, a few at a time, because of the economic reality of operating something like the Eurozone, or the military reality of NATO as well, which NATO is a Delian League for the United States, and it needs all of the states that are component parts of it to be smaller and weaker than the United States significantly, so that they can be adequately subordinated. Russia's too large for NATO, and it's too large for the EU in its current form. And then on top of that, the way in which Putin handled the crisis of the 90s was to adopt a set of policies and reforms and approaches that the West doesn't like. And he has been blamed for Trump. And I think to a large degree, there is a proxy war going on where they think that by fighting Putin, they are fighting Trump.
So people really believe that. They believe in the whole Russiagate thing. It wasn't just
Yeah, they think that even if you can't find the smoking gun evidence for it,
they still
there is some kind of connection. I think a lot of them do really believe that. Yes, a lot of them still think it, even though they were never able to prove it to the point at which it could be politically used to impeach. A lot of them still think it. In much the same way that a lot of people in the Bush administration continued to believe in the WMD. Or continued to believe in the theory of
domino. We're going to find it someday.
In the reverse domino theory, you install a liberal democracy in Iraq, and then it will spread. There are a lot of real ideologues, a lot of kind of fatuous
David
people in
Frum's
these administrations who get themselves
Bill
talked
Crystal's,
into these narratives. And a lot of them, you see the maps, a lot of them love this idea that you could cause the regime in Russia to collapse, and then you could split it up into a bunch of states and then slowly absorb it into the West, a few states at a time, and just keep moving across Eurasia, a few states at a time every decade until you're done. And that's their image for how you would get Russia into the Western sphere, as opposed to...
They're the true globalists.
I mean, because really, the question is, right, is Russia going to be allied to China? Is it going to be allied to the United States? And they don't see a way of allying it to the United States without first getting rid of the regime and breaking it up.
Bringing it into parts,
Right? Whereas someone like John Mearsheimer argues that it should be possible to cooperate with Russia as it currently exists without doing all of that. That position has not prevailed within the Washington consensus. The DC bubble, the blob, does not believe it's possible to cooperate with Russia in this kind of form, and that the regime has to go, and that there has to be some kind of change in the territory.
Okay, and so that is the impetus for this, for the funding of the war.
Regime until it collapses.
So they're they thought they probably like, well, we kind of did the same thing with Afghanistan. We can do it with Ukraine, and maybe for cheaper or affordable.
Yeah,
affordable, as long as they can convince
Afghanistan,
people, as long as they convince enough people that Putin really is the Night King, they can. If they get the people to go along with it, or not know enough to not go along with it, it can keep on.
They just have to squirrel together enough votes each time in Congress to pass the aid packages. And because there are no Americans fighting there, or very, very few, it's not putting large numbers of American soldiers in danger. It's not antagonizing or upsetting the soldiers or the veterans, the military families, the Gold Star families. They're not personally at risk. So it doesn't have the same kind of political legs as an issue, which even, say, the Iraq War had, nor does it have the same cost that the Iraq War had. It's a very cheap way of causing a lot of trouble for a state which they regard as a major problem.
I can't believe Zelensky's still hanging on. But anyway, I don't know enough about the internal politics there to know why that is. But
it's an ongoing war. It's very hard to push out.
It's just like, okay,
an administration in an ongoing conflict.
So here
which is true with respect to the Russians as well. I think it's very unlikely that they will toss Putin, although this continues to be the dream that the Russians will toss him. I think it's very hard to imagine that happening while the conflict is ongoing.
So this is something, and it says, "Thy will be done." And so you have a Ukraine soldier face to face with a Russian soldier. There's the symbology there. There's the idea that there's some Nazi-esque things. In the background, you have what looks to be like the Virgin Mary, but kind of like a Russian version of the Virgin Mary. And on the other side, I think it's, what's that guy's name? Baofet? Anyway, I think it's like the horse Baofet, it's like the kind of a devilish creature with horns and wings. And it says, "Thy will be done."
Yeah. They'll use all of this civilizational, religious kind of language as a legitimation for it. Both sides will. Both sides are happy to use all that. Samuel Huntington is the Western version of it, and Dugan is the right-wing version of it. And they're really two sides of the same coin, trying to civilizationalize a conflict that has completely different reasons for going on. Nothing to do with any of that. But of course, those are the arguments people will cough up, because then you can connect it to all the stupid culture war stuff and turn it into just another part of the culture war. And then you stick a flag in your profile to show which side of the culture war you're on, and implicitly say that the young men of the other country are just, fodder to you, and you don't care what happens to them. It's just horrific, I think, the way in which through the civilizational rhetoric of Huntington and Dugan, this war has been turned into a culture war issue. And this has been used to make people on both sides feel that it's okay to just kill enormous numbers of people who have absolutely no reason to need to die. No reason at all. No reason for any of this to happen. It's just completely unnecessary. And really, it just requires a willingness to think about other ways of cooperating. But there's no willingness. And so they will just cough up whatever is necessary to talk their side into feeling comfortable murdering the other side.
I wonder why. Now I know why I thought that was the Star of David. It's because there was another scandal. I didn't put it on here because it wasn't really U.S. politics related. But Candace Owens has it out for because she's also she's a big Christian as well. But she had some talk. She was talking about something about the Torah, the Talmud, or whatever, and how they also worship.
She's leaned heavily into anti-Semitism after she got canceled.
Baofet, or however you say it. And there was a picture of a dude who looked like this dude in the background. And then I saw this. So that must have been why, because I was thinking like, geez, what's with Baofet getting so much attention these days? But now
Candace
I see
Owens
that it's not
the same politics
it's a satanic
as Kanye
star.
West at this point.
It's a satanic star. And I see that the Baofet, if I'm saying that correctly, has his feathers, or the feathers of his wings are the same color as the Ukrainian flag, and the shawl that the Virgin Mary like character or figure has the colors of the Russian flag.
Yeah,
my
God has no nation.
The
concept of God in Christianity belongs to everybody. Has no nation. Can't be appendage to a particular nation or particular civilization or ethnic group.
But is this type of stuff because that it's getting like this, that you would share this on X?
It's the use of culture war signifiers.
Does it surprise you that this is where we're at now?
No, it doesn't surprise me. This is, of course, where it's heading. Of course, right? Everything turns into a culture war issue eventually. That's how they managed to suck the substance out of every major issue. Turn it into a question of which team are you on, and make it Manichaean. One is good and the other is bad. And any thinking or arguing or complexity is betraying good in favor of evil. And as long as you can frame everything like that, it's not even possible to have a discussion.
Yeah. And here's another one. Russia, this came, I think Finland released this, but Finland just opened up, they're going to have some U.S. military installations, getting a bit late in the game, but, they want to...
Everybody's committing genocide now. Everything has to be called genocide. And if you don't call it genocide... If you don't call it genocide, then you are in some way enabling whatever's going on, or you endorse it. If you don't use the most over-the-top, this is evil language, if you don't completely commit wholeheartedly to that language and you introduce any complexity at all, then you are supporting whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that equivalence is drawn immediately to intimidate people into not thinking.
And speaking of my time in Oxford, there was a geographer there, Danny Dorling. I think he's still there. And he wrote a book on Finland about how great Finland was. And because they had just, they had the young, hip woman prime minister, and they're not militaristic, and they kind of are fine with the, living in the the right values. And now it's like, if I ever run into him again, I'd be like, so how's that Finland book turned out for you? They've opened the doors, baby. Getting into that thing. No, I saw this and I was like, it was. I think it was the NATO, whatever the NATO person, the head person in Finland, the government of Finland, who's like the NATO liaison or whatever. Yeah, I think it was their account that put this on X, that Russia's committing genocide in Ukraine.
The whole debate about whether genocide is occurring moralizes the political conflict and distracts from the actual political dimension to the conflict, the actual steps that you would need to take to resolve it, the actual disputes that are at play. And the same is also true when it's applied to Israel-Palestine. It's a language that stops people from thinking. That's not to say, of course, that the things that are occurring are not horrible, terrible, and rightfully could be called all kinds of terrible names. But it doesn't help it end. It doesn't save anybody. It doesn't protect anyone. It's just a kind of voyeurism that people are engaged in.
No. And let's see, the Global Eye News, breaking, 159 countries are ready to adopt BRICS payment system. And there's a follow-up. BRICS will rule the world. I thought this is kind of there's a contradiction in this list.
Just total fantasy language.
Yeah, BRICS will rule the world, but of course, right now they have 23% of global GDP, 40% of the world's population, 16% of global trade, and 30% of global foreign exchange reserves. So they're not on their way to ruling yet.
Well, and even that is based on a level of cohesion that isn't actually there. There's a kind of posturing about levels of cohesion, but it's not actually there.
Well, I think this thing was like they're ready, like the countries are ready to consider it. I don't think it's all been fleshed out yet.
Right, but of course, the people who make these kinds of tweets, are always trying to overstate the degree to which the world can be divided into a West versus Rest Manichaean frame, where all of the countries on the rest are all on good team. And it's just the same stupid thing that we do, but in reverse. They just swap the sides, but at no point do they turn their brains on or begin to think.
Yeah. Did I lose the... Oh, crap. I have to... Oh, yes. Okay. All right. BB Tywin Lannister Netanyahu. And do you really think the crown gives you power? That's actually a Tywin Lannister quote, but I thought it's something he might say. And of course, in terms of this, we know that, for example, there's the AIPAC tracker, which is a good chart, and it has this chart of like how many Republican people supported by AIPAC are in Congress and how many Democrats supported by AIPAC in Congress, which is like 80% of Congress is AIPAC-backed candidates, and AIPAC will celebrate this and say our candidates win. And my understanding is from what I've gathered is that one of the things that Netanyahu has on his side, even though he's been in political hot water off and on for a long time, is that he brings the Americans. He maintains American support, or on both sides of the aisle, for Israel.
Oh no, that wouldn't be a relevant argument for him. That the lobbying groups have nothing to do with Netanyahu and exist and function totally without him. There are a lot of Democrats who quite dislike him, including Obama, including Biden. Trump at this point personally dislikes him. Netanyahu is not at all necessary to maintain the U.S.-Israel relationship.
But then how do you explain...
The United States would very much like to see him gone. Both
but how do you explain the
parties would
56?
very much
The
like to see him
56.
gone.
Then how do you explain also? I'm not disputing that again because I don't have the facts on the ground to know how his political fortunes and what makes him such a long-term enduring political figure in Israel.
It's internal divisions within Israel that result
but
in
he
it.
did
The
go and
opposition
get
has never been able to unite to get rid of him.
But he did get 56 ovations in a 58-minute speech.
Yeah, meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi called it one of the worst speeches that was ever given before Congress.
So what do you make of that, though? Who were they applauding for, or who were they wanting to be seen to applaud? If
they're the state of Israel rather than the person there to personate it.
Okay.
They're to show their continuing commitment to Israel as a state. But the Mearsheimer-Waltz book was written before Netanyahu got back in. About the role of the lobby and its the level of importance that it has in maintaining the relationship. That book and the controversy around it occurred in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, and
back in the Ariel Sharon era.
Yeah, and Ilan Pappé, Ilan Pappé, is that his name? The Jewish. No wait. He's a British Israeli historian. Ilan Pappé, I think his name is. He had a book that came out 6 months ago on the lobby as well, the Jewish lobby or AIPAC. I haven't read it yet.
Well, it's the Israel lobby. It's not the Jewish lobby because there are, of course, many people
Israeli,
who are
Israeli
Jews
lobby,
who don't support the lobby and
Israeli
disagree
lobby.
firmly with what it does. And there's a big difference between those two things. The religion and the supporters of that
you're right. I meant to say
state
Israeli lobby.
are different things.
Yeah. I meant to say Israeli lobby, and but AIPAC also on this thing is that they were able to, let's see, it was Bowman lost his primary, and now what's her name from Missouri? Cori Bush lost her primary, and so people are using this as an example to show again how powerful AIPAC is, and my thing is that, of course, you can look at the money, and they did spend a lot of money on those candidates, and it's not a big mystery as to why. But what doesn't get discussed is that those weren't very strong candidates. In this time around, Bowman and Cori Bush, they got in, and then what did they have to show for it? I find it hard. I don't know their constituencies, but I find it hard to believe that if they were a fantastic or a working hard for the people type of candidate, that would AIPAC been able to do what they did?
Well, yes, it's not as if the members of the squad have the kinds of political achievements that would prevent this from going on. Although I think the point can be made, and indeed has been made by other people, that members of the squad who were more willing to stay within the box of mainstream DC opinion, that they did not get the same level of opposition. Somebody like AOC, who stayed more within the box, did not receive the same level of opposition. I think Ilhan Omar survived in Minnesota after that story didn't get as much attention, but Ilhan Omar did survive.
She did? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. There's nothing particularly malevolent about AIPAC. It's a lobbying group like all of the other lobbying groups that exist in American politics, like the healthcare lobby, like the defense lobby, and there are lobbies for many other states, including a lobby for the Arab states. But those lobbies are not always as well organized or as effectively run. AIPAC is a very well-run group.
Yeah, and they don't have to register as a foreign agent either. They're exempt from that. People make a lot out of that as well.
Well, there's a question about how much of the support comes directly from Israel versus how much of it comes from people in the United States who sympathize with Israel, because, of course, you wouldn't have to register as a foreign agent if you're able to show that a large amount of your support, and I don't know exactly what the rule is for how much support or what balance or arrangement of support is necessary. But I'm sure they can show that there's a significant number of American citizens who support and donate and contribute to the organization.
But there is an official exemption, is what I'm saying. There's an official exemption.
Yes, but of course, that's something that would be advocated for by such groups. And we see similar kinds of arguments abound when we're talking about, say, Western lobbyists in Georgia or Russia. And these states try to pass, various rules about do you have to identify as a foreign agent. And in those cases, we say, shouldn't those organizations not have to identify as foreign agents? Because aren't there plenty of people in Georgia and Russia who have liberal views and who want to express those liberal views? And shouldn't the society be open to that without equating that immediately with outside foreign influence? Now, is there outside foreign influence? I'm sure there is some. But you can muddle these things. And they can be muddled politically in lots of different ways to lots of different effects. I would operate from a view that we have, to too large a degree, denormalized this. AIPAC is not an exceptional case. It is just one of these lobbying groups that has been able to use its level of organization to get various things that it wants that aren't necessarily in the public interest. The same is true of every other lobbying group in DC. And the best organized ones get the most outrageous stuff for themselves. And AIPAC is a particularly well-organized instance of a lobbying group, but not fundamentally different from the healthcare lobby, which I think has done much more damage to the country, by the way. The healthcare lobby has protected a sector that's double the size as a percentage of GDP that it should be.
All right. So you're saying that people are trying to make AIPAC into more than it is.
And yet at the same time, we should acknowledge that there is a lobby that advocates on behalf of a state, and it often gets what it wants, and what it wants is not necessarily obviously in the American interest. And it's something that should be debated and should be discussed, but not in a hyperventilating way that treats it as some kind of conspiratorial organization, or which can be, the way that people talk about it, it allows them to be painted as anti-Semitic because they are sloppy in the way they talk about it, and because they link it into these notions of some kind of global elite that straightforwardly in a unitary way dictates what occurs. No, what we have is many, many, many different elites and different organized constituencies, different factions, different economic sectors, different industries that have different stakes in capitalism, that are constantly in conflict with each other, constantly organizing and competing with each other for influence. And there's nothing special about any given one of them. They're all, to varying degrees, screwing us over in various ways. And we should talk about all of that in a non-hyperventilating, non-conspiratorial way.
Well, on that note, Anya Parampil, this is Trump this is from when Trump gave her the context of this is that Adelson's wife, what's her name? I can't remember the name of, anyway. Miriam Adelson. Sherrod Adelson has died, and Miriam Adelson is his wife, and so now and they have billions of dollars anyway. And she's obviously she's also a Jewish American, but also I don't know if she also has Israeli citizenship, probably.
Anyway. The Adelsons are Tea Party people. They mainly sponsor Republicans, and their principal interest has been Tea Party candidates.
But do they have? Yeah, but do they have? They might have co-citizenship. I don't know. Anyway, it wouldn't surprise me if they did because it's easy to get.
Well, I wouldn't suggest something like that because that sounds like you're talking about dual loyalty or something, and that
no. It's a question which people can have dual loyalty. I'm not suggesting. I'm just saying I don't know if she has. If her and her husband are also,
I wouldn't even raise that in relation to this because that's something that can only cause trouble to even talk about it like that. It's very unhelpful to discuss it in that way. To accuse people of dual loyalty, especially in relation to Judaism, is a huge problem.
Well, yeah, but who does that? Israel. Yeah,
Israel engages in a lot of anti-Semitic tropes in its own defense.
Whether you want it to be or not.
No. That is not. I completely disagree with that.
That's what
it is not the nation state of the Jews. That is not at all the case. There are many people.
I'm saying that
they can claim that, but that doesn't make it true.
I'm saying that's what I'm saying. I'm saying Israel says that.
Yeah, that representational claim should be challenged. It should not be accepted at face value.
And lots of Jewish people do. I know that. I'm very well versed in the difference.
And we should consistently maintain that instead of we shouldn't be sloppy with the way that we talk about this.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that so that's the point that I make. I'm quite aware that there's a lot of Jewish people who dispute that, don't like them having to be roped in all the time to
right. So then you should not say something that can be framed as a dual loyalty claim.
Israel
you should not say that.
Yeah. But
that's not right to say.
No. Well, I wasn't saying it like that. I just was legitimately, I was actually curious if they were or not.
No, they know very well, and you know very well how that will be taken by people who see this.
Actually, not well,
yes,
not in this.
You do.
Well, in certain contexts, I just didn't know, because the reason why I brought it up is the story is, or what's being said is, and I don't know if this is true, is that what Miriam Adelson wants in exchange for this $100 million is, if Trump gets elected, she wants him to do what she can for Israel to annex the West Bank. That's the story.
Adelsons have a lot of different issues that they care about. That's not a media story. That's a bunch of people making conspiracy theories about what they think the Adelsons want. The Adelsons have a number. I'm sure that she wants the Trump administration to be pro-Israel, but that would be one thing that the Adelsons want amongst a lot of other things. The Adelsons have a lot of different stakes. They are not reducible to a religious interest or a particular national interest. They have a lot of different policies that they care about. They've donated extensively to candidates across the board in the Republican Party to advance a variety of kind of libertarian Tea Party tax goals. That's been a lot of what they've been interested in. So when people start talking about the Adelsons as if they're a single issue family that only cares about something to do with Israel, this is just not at all what they are politically as a force.
Okay, so you would scold an Anya Parampil then for this this tweet. How do Americans?
I think that a lot of people think that when they're talking about Israel and Palestine, they don't have to be precise. They don't have to be exact. And as a result, they say a lot of sloppy things that aren't true and that make it easy for them to be dismissed as anti-Semites by the lobby. And you have to be very careful when you talk about this, because I think that there is lots of space for legitimate criticism, and we should make it. But we have to make it in a way which is attentive to the way in which it is received. And I don't want anyone to ever get the impression that I have anything negative to say about any of the major world religions or their adherents. And it's very important that we make very, very clear when we talk about this, that we have nothing against any of the major religions or their adherents. And when people do this all the time, this kind of sloppy language about it. And it's just, why do we need to be, why should we be sloppy?
And also
like that?
it also gets more confusing, because there's a lot of people who I don't even know what the word would, like, they're ethnically Jewish or they're secular. So there's a lot of people who are not, but people hear it and they become really afraid, and they think that genuinely the people who are being sloppy hate them and want them dead. And this is something that we have to really pay attention to. Well, yeah, but they should also, I'm fine with that. They should also look at the other generators of that, and I'm going to get to that because it's getting crazy. So anyway, so good point though, that we shouldn't presume that Miriam Adelson or the Adelson Foundation or whatever it is a purely single issue donator. And you mentioned that this isn't the first time they've donated to Republican Party.
They've been in the elections, more than 10 years now. Sheldon Adelson was a regular contributor for a long time to many, many parties and campaigns. I completely disagree with the Adelsons and what they support politically, but it's important to be clear about what they are and what they do. For the most part, their interests are economic. They happen to care about the Israel issue, but for the most part, their advocacy has been about the economy.
Yeah. No, and I was joking with my kids the other day. I was like, because again, I totally get your point. There's certain people where the so-called dual loyalty doesn't come into play. So for example, if I was to move my family back to the United States, no one would probably be concerned that my kids were were kind of secret agents for Holland.
That's because the two states are friendly, right? But for instance, I read a story about Hungary has made it easier for Russians to move to Hungary, to immigrate to Hungary. And immediately people write a story about, is this a backdoor to Russian spies coming into the European Union? This way of talking can really result in some nasty attitudes, because why shouldn't Russians, if they want to work in the West, why shouldn't there be a process for them to come over and work in the West? Because we're going to be suspicious of everybody, of being a spy on the basis that they come from Russia. We're treating Russia as an enemy state to that degree.
I think to give them the benefit of the doubt, the people who want to focus a lot on Republicans, or Trump in particular, his relations with Adelson and other people, is because they're like, okay, you say America first, America first, America first, but yet here you are with this country, here you are with that country, or whatever.
Well, you don't even need that.
It doesn't work out with
Kushner.
Kushner
so and Ivanka Trump are very pro-Israel and have consistently been pro-Israel. And the administration, the previous Trump administration, was consistently pro-Israel. Trump was very pro-Netanyahu, even until Netanyahu agreed that he lost the election, and then he became personally angry with Netanyahu.
No, but I think that one of the reasons why they want to dig on them is
I
think one of the reasons why they want to dig on them on this, and of course I can't know their like internal feelings, but they want to put like, oh, I thought it was America first, but look at what you're doing that. But of course, which doesn't mean that people who have an awareness of the context and the history of these issues shouldn't be aware of what they may be contributing to. But just in terms of how somebody should tell, I don't know. So here's just an example. So Stop Antisemitism is an organization. I don't know who they're affiliated with, but they will post people's faces online. So this is a young woman who's working at a Walgreens. I took out her face but they posted this yesterday, and it says, "Hey, at Walgreens, are keffiyehs part of your official dress code, or is this a new trend we missed? Several of our Jewish customers have reached out to us expressing how uncomfortable they feel shopping in your store when your employees are outfitted in such controversial after 10/7, often viewed as a hateful attire." They published this girl's face and the address of the store that she works in and put it online.
Yeah, and that's an instance of Islamophobia.
I mean,
of course, that's a garment that is worn by many Muslims in many countries. It is that's an instance of Islamophobia. It's not justified in any direction.
I couldn't believe it. Like the person, and this poor girl, she's at work, and someone's taking a picture, and then it's posted on an account with and the address. I wonder if it's still, that can't be, I wonder if it's still
they're engaged
online.
in this very enemy thinking where it's okay to do whatever to somebody who's from the other group. It's just awful. It's awful stuff. And it's awful in both directions. Where anybody who's engaged in Manichaean thinking and treating one of the groups is totally evil and you can do anything you want to them is engaged in very, very dark, unhelpful thinking that is not about making peace. Peace is about finding ways to talk to people, bring them together, find ways of cooperating. You don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to not have continuing points of disagreement, but to find ways to live alongside people without killing them. You have to be, you can't have this mentality that just because somebody wears something that might identify them as perhaps Muslim or wears something that identifies them as perhaps Jewish, that they can be slotted into a box of people who defend a particular state or people who defend a particular set of behaviors. Someone who's a Palestine, sympathizes with the Palestinians is not obviously or necessarily someone who makes excuses for terrorist acts committed by Hamas. And in the same way that someone who sympathizes with Israel is not necessarily someone who is a supporter of the particular things that the Israeli state is doing. And then leaving aside, there's also a large number of Muslims who have their bones to pick with the Palestinian cause and Jews who have their bones to pick with the Israeli state. And all of these complexities should be acknowledged. We shouldn't be just eliding them all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I also, if anyone that's been following this comic for a long time, is that it's quite clear that there's never been a serious interest in resolving this issue and kind of two-state solution is, it's always been, even when there's when things have been so extreme in Israel, has been like, well, they'll get maybe a state in name only, but not in particular. So if you have a situation where it's quite clear that the long-term goal is, what Ilan Pappé says, is that they want as much of that area as possible, as few Palestinians as possible, and they will, and the idea that that's the long-term thing. Once you get to a certain point, that what's going on now, and you have the United States shows no willingness to even, it seems, to even suggest that we might start to reduce the aid and reduce the military thing. I think that I would be very hesitant and disdainful of any kind of both sides thing to compare the two sides of this conflict. I mean, I think there's one that's quite so I don't.
There's one that's much stronger than the other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But just because one is much stronger than the other doesn't mean that there is some kind of obvious thing to be achieved by just taking the side of the weak. Right? Just taking the side of, say, Hamas doesn't accomplish anything for the Palestinians, right? We would all agree with that. Sure.
I wouldn't.
What does it accomplish to take the side of Hamas?
Well, to take the side, you have to see what the side is that the idea is that this group, since its evolution, has been about resisting and fighting the Israeli occupation of that area.
What's the end game for them? Mm-hmm. What ultimately is achieved by the tactics that they're using?
Well, the check they use now is that they're watching while Israel self-destructs under the weight of its own contradictions is one thing.
It's not self-destructing.
I would say
very clearly Israel is not self-destructing.
Well, if you look at,
it's becoming worse in various ways, but it's not self-destructing.
Okay, hold on. But if you look at, what I would say is that when you have they said, if we take them at their word, which is, here or there, the reasons why they undertook the events of October 7th is that they saw the Abraham Accords going in a certain direction, and also the other things that had happened with the occasional mowing of the lawn and the peaceful protests or
sure, they point out all sorts of bad things that the Israeli state has done.
No, but let me finish.
Now what do you do?
No, but what I would say is that they took this aim. Nobody knows the Israeli state, the regime, better than Hamas does. So I don't know if they thought they would go as far as they did.
That's standpoint epistemology. That's completely irrelevant.
If you let me finish, what's quite clear to me is that I characterize Israel as kind of, at this point, like a timeshare protection racket colony. It is a military with a state. And the goal is, of course, they wanted my understanding of the Zionist political projects. They wanted a Jewish nation state, and the plan has always been the project has always been over the long term to have as much of historical Palestine as possible, as few Palestinians as possible. Now, they in the service of that goal have a series of what you call unavoidable burdens. Yeah, so whether it be the Nakba or the ethnic cleansing or the not or taking or occupying territory and not giving it back, various apartheid, dual justice, two policy system. There's nothing that Israelis have ever done that would show Palestinians they were ever at all serious about any kind of peaceful, quote unquote, two-state solution.
Sure, I agree with that. So what does that have to do with justifying terrorism?
Okay, what I would say is that I don't consider what Hamas did on October 7th terrorism. Not at all.
What's terrorism then? At what point?
Yeah. What I would consider, unless we want to compare, then the IDF is as much of a terrorist organization as Hamas is. I think it's imperative to measure with two. It's also problematic to compare.
I don't defend what the IDF does.
Apples and oranges.
I don't defend what the IDF does. Why are you defending what Hamas does?
No, I would not defend the suicide bombing things that happened during the Second Intifada when I lived in Gaza for 2 years. I would not defend that. And was that a terrorist act? Yeah. Has Hamas engaged in? Have they carried out terrorist acts? Yeah. Who hasn't? War is a terrorist act. Colonization is a terrorist act.
I'm asking, do we defend the act? Do we defend the act? We wouldn't defend the IDF committing an act of murder against the civilian population.
Oh, here's another thing. If you live now, I would say that fine. Anybody under 18, innocent civilian, that's fine. Other than that, if you have a project, a colonial, if you have the project in Israel that requires, we know enough about because that is been instituted on a place where other people were already existing. You have an apartheid situation.
This is moralizing.
No, it's not. It's not moralizing.
Yes.
It's not.
It is.
No. What I would say is that if you are participating in that project, that is not a risk-free project. So if you have mandatory conscription, if you have reservist, no, I'm not reservist things in there. No,
you're treating individuals who have been encouraged by a state to be in a place. You're treating them as responsible for the whole project.
Yeah.
Are the 600,000 settlers who have moved at the encouragement of the Israeli state to the West Bank, are they individually all culpable such that they're legitimate targets?
Yes.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it, but if you're going to engage and if you're going to be a settler, and if you want to then bitch and moan when the violence hits your direction, sorry, I have no truck with that.
I have no truck with targeting people
if you have
violent acts when you have no plan to accomplish anything positive with those acts.
That's not. I don't agree at all. There was no plan.
There is no credible strategy that Hamas has.
It wasn't
Hamas has no credible strategy. There is no result that can be achieved by the action of Hamas except more violence and death.
No. This is the thing: is that it could. Here's the thing: is that if you want to pretend that the Hamas from 2000 is the Hamas of today, you can go ahead and do that. I would disagree, and I would suggest that you look into Stanley Cohen's work, who's been, their lawyer.
What's happened since October 7th? What it caused was more violence to occur in the region than was occurring before.
Why would you suggest people just go along with bare life and survival? What kind of life?
I'm not suggesting they go along with bare life and survival, but I'm also
if you were to look, here's what they did.
Activity.
They decided to do. They knew they would provoke Israel. They knew that Israel would overreact. I don't know if they knew they would go on to this extent, or that the United States and everybody else would keep on calling this self-defense. That you can murder anybody, you can drop all the bombs you want, you can deny food and water and everything else, and we'll keep on calling it self-defense.
I'm not calling it self-defense.
And we'll pretend.
I'm calling it stupid.
No, we will pretend that there's some sort of equivalence between a resistance operation with no army, no navy.
Again, this is moralizing about it.
It's not
Where does it go? What is the actual outcome of it?
I will tell you. I will say is that if you want to say what's been accomplished at a tremendous price in a life, I don't deny that, is that there was nobody at all was talking about Israel-Palestine at that point. It was a done deal. People just said, okay, eventually it's just going to kind of die off, and bit by bit, the West Bank will be eaten up by settlers. Bit by bit, people will die off or will leave Gaza. We mow the lawn every once in a while. They'll be demoralized. They'll turn against Hamas. Then we'll have some sort of, eventually.
It's not a major political issue worldwide right now.
Down the numbers. So either they accept that thing, because nobody, when they did, even with the March of Return,
it's still like that.
Even with the March of Return,
nothing has changed.
No, I disagree with that totally. I don't know what's going to happen. What I'll say is that nobody was with that. You now have Israel that wants to open up a front with Lebanon, with Syria, with Iran. They're trying. It seems to be the main reason.
It's sad because this is code. Nothing has actually changed. Nothing has changed in that region at all.
Yes, it has.
No.
No.
The sad thing is that people have rationalized killing because they think that they're going to change public opinion, that they think they're going to change the way that the world responds to this conflict, but they haven't.
But who's the world?
The weapons are still going to flow in.
Yeah, yes,
they've got nuclear weapons. Israel's a nuclear-armed state.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is going to change. They're not going anywhere. The state's not going to collapse. It's not going to disappear from the earth.
You're putting everybody else in place of the Palestinians who were living in that situation for the last 75 years. If you put yourself in their position's
gotten worse because now Gaza is completely bombed out. And it's a humanitarian crisis. So their position has become much worse.
Either you die fast or die slow. That's one thing. But I will say is we will see. But what I would say is that I'm not saying there wasn't a huge price has been paid. But if you look at what their political objectives were, what they state their political objectives were for doing what they did on October 7th, so far, what you have is more and more people who look at Israel and see what's going on. When you have not just
they're really lucky that the Egyptians didn't open the border because what almost happened. The Egyptians almost opened the border and allowed Israel to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
What you know is what all the dirty laundry of Zionism, of the Zionist project, has been revealed, including the rationalization of prisoner rape.
What actually happened? Apart from all this discourse, apart from all the chatter, what actually occurred? What actually occurred is that the Egyptian state came closer than it ever has before to agreeing to the ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
They almost, and if there was a large enough aid package, it might yet happen. It might yet happen that the Egyptians will agree. They've constructed a concentration camp on the border with Gaza. The Egyptian state has contingency plans to absorb the population of Gaza for redistribution into the West. What Hamas very nearly achieved is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza.
So they're wrong. Okay. So they're wrong for doing it fast rather than slow.
If you actually want to be able to stay in the territory, you can't do this kind of stuff. If you actually want Palestinians to stay in Gaza and to live there, this is not the way to make that happen.
But it depends on what kind
of. This is the way to get ethnic cleansing to happen.
You want to put on. If you want to justify, they should have just settled for.
It's survival. Not about justifying. It's about what is actually going to take place.
Life.
What will happen?
But here, what I would put to you is that, given everything that's happened, the destruction and the genocidal campaign, and I have no problem calling it a genocidal campaign because it is one. The intents there, the what they say.
That's a complete distraction from what's really at issue.
That's nice. It's a distraction, but that is clear. Is that all of the stuff that we've been told, or that the PR has been unmasked. Now, so far in the West, in particular, it doesn't matter because they keep on sending them the weapons, they keep on providing them the support. Okay.
The situation there has been masked over and over again.
What about self-determination? Hamas is the people's support of Hamas is not weakening.
There is not going to be any kind of self-determination. There is not going to be any kind of Palestinian state.
But you would have told them just to suck it up, deal with what you get, and just die out slowly.
No, I would say.
Because what was the alternative? What was the alternative to
the alternative is to find a way to stay in the territory and be there.
And be there
when they annex it. When they annex it, which they eventually will, have Palestinians who are still there. Get to a point where there's intermingling between the Palestinians who live in the territory and the Israelis.
Oh my God.
Now there is a mixed society again.
What do you think there's been for 75 years?
There used to be intermingling. It used to be possible.
With his kibbutz thing. The kibbutz is colonialism, not socialism. This idea that they want that there is
no sharp distinction between the Palestinians and the Israelis. They are not two peoples. They are not two peoples. They are the people from the same place with different religious beliefs. They're not two people.
That's fine, but we're not talking about you and me. What I'm saying is if you show me evidence that in Israel there's any kind of appetite for what you're talking about, even before October 7th. If you think
I agree that there isn't.
Want to talk about the dehumanization,
will there still be Palestinians there? Will there still be Palestinians there, or will they be pushed out? That's the question. The question is, will there still be Palestinians in the territory, or will they be forced to leave? That's the question. But at this point, there's not going to be a Palestinian state. That
question was, the thing is that if you look at what's been going on over the last especially the last 30 or some years with the settlements, it's a slow death rather than a fast one, or a slow depopulation rather than a fast one. Now, I am not happy about anything that's going on.
They're not depopulating it.
But the idea that you could, the idea that somehow that it would have been, that somehow it would have gotten better, or would have maintained if
it got better in South Africa, didn't it? It got better in South Africa, didn't it?
The South Africans and the Zionists.
You didn't have to create two states, did you? You didn't have to create two states.
No. You show me who in Israel has ever been really interested.
You could say the same thing. You could say the same thing if we were in Georgia in 1845. You could say, how will it ever be possible for African Americans to live alongside Southerners in Georgia? Very clearly, they can't live together, and therefore all of the Africans have to go to Liberia, or they have to get their own state. These kinds of beliefs were entertained by people in that period. It was a lack of imagination that caused them to entertain.
Okay, but isn't it sad that Zionism is a throwback to that?
We can overcome that, but to overcome it, we have to stop with the violence that intensifies the opposition.
Okay, and so who is
we have to stop the violence.
And who is the originator and the perpetrator of that violence?
Thinking about it in that kind of way, rather than what kinds of conditions are necessary for peace, is not helpful. Talking about who's at fault morally, who's blameworthy, that doesn't get us to a concrete situation that allows the violence to stop. Now, I agree with you that a lot of the violence is coming, of course, from the IDF and from the Israeli state, and that the Israeli state is very much driving a cycle of violence with Hamas. There's a symbiotic relationship between Hamas and Netanyahu. They feed off each other and benefit from each other. And we have to find a way to bring that symbiotic relationship to an end. But we cannot imagine that this is something which only comes from one. The way in which the Palestinians are reacting, the Palestinians who support Hamas are reacting, aids Netanyahu, which is why Netanyahu has been found to have funneled resources to Hamas.
Yeah, that's, of course, divide and conquer is an old trick. What I would say is that what I see as it's changed is one thing is that Hamas has no interest in ruling. They have no interest in trying to run for another election, or even if it ever gets to that point there. They don't want to rule. They want to force Israel to a meaningful negotiation, and they came They came on to the conclusion that the language that Netanyahu understands is force, and I think they're right about that. Unfortunately,
they're not going to achieve that.
Hold on. So,
they're not right about that. They're wrong.
Again. It hasn't even been a year, so let's hold on. So
how many more people should we get killed while we wait for this very obviously false theory to be proven false?
No, and you're going to stop, and you think Israel wants to stop the killing?
I am not suggesting that at all. I am not suggesting that at all. But of course, this is the kind of one-sided thinking where if you don't agree with me in my version of events, you must be on the other side. You must defend the other
What
people.
I'm saying
terminating.
No, what I'm saying is that sometimes, I when you have the negotiation, but what I would say is that
Sarah, I think we're over 3 hours. I think I'm going to have to wrap this up. Okay. I think we've made a good attempt to do this the last few weeks, but I think we've probably come to the end of it.
Okay.
Because I can't be defending terrorist activity. I can't be defending that kind of stuff. I can't be talking about the Israeli lobby as if it's a Jewish organization. I can't be having that kind of casual anti-Semitism. I can't be doing that. And I can't be on a channel where that occurs. So
how am I anti-Semitic?
Because you call them a Jewish lobby. And you walk it back, but then it's this where we're talking about what Hamas is doing and you're defending it and suggesting that it in some way contributes to peace. I can't have this. This is over the line for me.
All right.
It's been fun doing it, but this is over the line.
Okay, so all right, so okay.
All right. But I have enjoyed talking about the election, and it's been